What if I told you that somewhere out there, hidden beneath layers of time and earth, lies a fortune beyond imagination, waiting to be discovered? Throughout history, humanity has been captivated by the allure of lost treasures, riches that vanished from the pages of time, treasures that have fueled legends, inspired explorers, and driven countless adventurers to the farthest corners of the earth in search of fame, fortune, and the sheer thrill of the unknown. From ancient kings hoarding gold to pirate captains burying chests on remote islands, the stories of these missing fortunes stir something deep within us, awakening the very spirit of exploration that has defined our species for millennia. Think about it for a moment: how many explorers have risked everything, traversing deserts, diving into forgotten shipwrecks, and decoding cryptic maps, all for the chance to uncover these legendary treasures. This isn't just about wealth, it's about the human desire to solve mysteries, to touch history, and perhaps to claim a piece of the past that once seemed forever lost. Every one of these treasures carries not just material value, but the weight of stories, dreams, and the enduring hope that maybe, just maybe, the next great discovery is waiting for the right person to come along. Today, we embark on a journey through 25 of history's most legendary lost treasures, riches that have captivated explorers for centuries. We'll uncover tales of vast hoards hidden by ancient rulers, priceless artifacts vanished without a trace, and caches of gold and jewels that have eluded even the most determined treasure hunters. So join me as we explore the mysteries, the myths, and the thrilling possibilities that surround these incredible stories. Who knows, by the end, you might find yourself dreaming of setting out on an adventure of your own. Our journey begins not with chests of gold or jeweled crowns, but with an object of immense spiritual power whose story is woven into the very fabric of history and faith, the Ark of the Covenant. Described in the book of Exodus, this was no ordinary treasure chest. It was a divine masterpiece, a testament to heavenly craftsmanship. Its construction was a sacred undertaking, using the finest acacia wood overlaid with pure gold inside and out. A crown of gold ran around its top, and it was carried by 2 poles slid through 4 golden rings. But the most striking feature was its lid, known as the mercy seat. This was a solid gold slab upon which sat 2 magnificent cherubim, angels with outstretched wings facing each other, forming a space where the presence of God Himself was believed to dwell. This was not merely a container, it was a weapon and a conduit of celestial power. Ancient texts recount its incredible abilities. It could part the waters of the Jordan River, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry land. In battle, carrying the ark before the army was said to guarantee victory. Most fearsome of all was its deadly power. It was said to strike down those who touched it improperly, obliterating entire armies and leveling mountains. It was the ultimate symbol of a covenant between a people and their God, a physical manifestation of divine authority on earth. For centuries, it resided in the innermost chamber of the temple in Jerusalem, the Holy of Holies, seen only by the high priest once a year. And then it vanished, following the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem in 587 BC. The great temple was sacked and destroyed. Historical records are silent on the fate of the ark. It simply disappears from the historical record, sparking one of history's greatest mysteries. So where did it go? One enduring theory suggests it was smuggled out of Jerusalem before the Babylonians arrived. This theory points to Ethiopia, where the ancient Orthodox Church in Axum claims to safeguard the ark in a dedicated chapel. Only one guardian monk is ever allowed to see it, and he protects it for his entire life, a tradition that has endured for centuries. Other scholars propose it was hidden in a labyrinth of secret tunnels deep beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, sealed away to protect it from invaders waiting to be rediscovered. Some even speculate it was taken to Egypt or perhaps lost entirely, melted down for its priceless gold by conquering armies. The mystery endures because the ark represents more than lost gold. It is a lost connection to the divine, a physical object of unimaginable historical and religious significance that continues to captivate archaeologists, theologians, and treasure hunters alike. Its absence is a void that fuels endless speculation and dreams of discovery. But speaking of divinely powerful objects and the leaders who sought to protect them, no organization in history is more shrouded in myth and conspiracy than our next treasure's guardians, the Knights Templar. Imagine an order of warrior monks risen from humble beginnings to become the most powerful financial and military entity of the Middle Ages, only to be violently dissolved almost overnight, their vast wealth vanishing without a trace. From the sacred to the spectacularly wealthy, the story of the Templars' lost treasure is a labyrinth of history, heresy, and whispered secrets. Founded in 1118 to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, as they were formerly known, quickly became far more than simple bodyguards. Through generous donations of land and money from pious European nobles, they established a vast network of properties, from preceptories in England to mighty castles in the Levant. Their true genius, however, lay in innovation. They essentially invented modern banking. A pilgrim could deposit his wealth at a Templar house in London and receive a coded letter of credit, which he could then exchange for funds at a Templar fortress in Jerusalem, effectively creating the first international travelers' checks and making them unimaginably rich in the process. They were the bankers to kings and popes, trusted utterly for their integrity and military prowess. This immense power and wealth, however, bred envy and fear. On Friday, October 13, 1307, King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the order, saw his chance. In a meticulously coordinated dawn raid across the entire country, he had hundreds of Templars, including their Grand Master Jacques de Molay, arrested on charges of heresy, blasphemy, and obscene secret rituals. The suddenness of the attack was shocking. Under brutal torture, many Templars confessed to the fabricated crimes, but despite the French crown and the Pope's subsequent suppression of the order, a critical question remained: where was the legendary Templar treasure? The king's men ransacked the Paris temple, their headquarters, but found only a fraction of the wealth they expected. The main treasury had simply disappeared. This is where history bleeds into legend. What exactly was lost? It certainly included chests of gold, silver coin, and priceless religious artifacts accumulated over 2 centuries. But many believe the true treasure was far more profound. Some speculate the Templars had discovered something beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem during their early years. Perhaps the Ark of the Covenant itself, or documents proving the earthly bloodline of Jesus Christ, a secret that could shatter the authority of the Church. Others theorize they had found the Holy Grail, the ultimate Christian relic, and smuggled it to safety. Their fleet of ships, which also vanished from their port at La Rochelle, adds to the mystery, suggesting a well-planned evacuation of their most precious cargo. So where could such a fortune be hidden? The possibilities are as romantic as they are endless. Many point to Scotland, where some Templars allegedly fought alongside Robert the Bruce after their dissolution, potentially secreting their treasure deep beneath Rosslyn Chapel, whose ornate carvings some say hold encrypted maps. Others look to Portugal, where the order simply changed its name to the Order of Christ and continued its operations under royal protection, its wealth seamlessly integrated into a new identity. There are even tales of the treasure crossing the Atlantic, hidden long before Columbus in what is now modern-day New England or Nova Scotia, guarded by the local indigenous peoples. The mystery endures because it represents more than just lost gold. It is the ghost of a suppressed power, a secret history waiting to be unearthed, fueling the dreams of treasure hunters for over 700 years. From divine covenants and the secret wealth of knights, we turn now to a treasure that was literally a work of art, a breathtakingly beautiful chamber that was plundered from the earth and then seemingly returned to it, the Amber Room. Imagine an entire room, walls adorned not with simple wallpaper or paint, but with intricate mosaics crafted entirely from solid amber, that beautiful fossilized tree resin that holds the warmth of the sun within its golden hues. This was no mere decoration, it was the eighth wonder of the world. The amber panels were backed with gold leaf and inlaid with precious jewels, while magnificent mirrors and Florentine mosaics made of semi-precious stones like jasper and quartz reflected the light from countless candles, making the entire room appear as if it were constructed from living, glowing honey. It was a masterpiece of Baroque art, a symphony in gold and light. The room's story begins in Prussia in the early 18th century. It was designed by German Baroque sculptor Andreas Schluter and Danish amber craftsman Gottfried Wolfram for the palace of King Frederick I. However, it was gifted in 1716 to Peter the Great of Russia by Frederick's son, Frederick William I, as a diplomatic gesture to strengthen an alliance against Sweden. The precious panels were packed into 18 large crates and sent to Russia. It was Peter's daughter, Empress Elizabeth, who had it installed in the Catherine Palace in Tsarskoye Selo outside St. Petersburg. But it was Catherine the Great who truly perfected it. In the 1770s, she commissioned her court architects to expand the room, adding even more amber and magnificent new mosaics. When it was complete, the room covered over 55 square meters and contained over 6 tons of priceless amber, a treasure so unique it was considered utterly priceless. For nearly 2 centuries, it stood as a glittering testament to Russian imperial splendor, astonishing all who saw it, that is, until the tide of war swept over it. In 1941, as Nazi forces advanced on Leningrad during their invasion of the Soviet Union, the curators at the Catherine Palace desperately tried to save the amber room. They attempted to dismantle it, but the centuries-old amber had become dry and brittle, crumbling at the touch. Fearing its complete destruction, they made a fateful decision. They hid it in place. They covered the magnificent walls with a simple, unassuming wallpaper, hoping the invaders would overlook it. The ruse failed. German soldiers, specifically from an Army Group North unit tasked with seizing cultural treasures, recognized the room for what it was. They meticulously dismantled it, packed the panels into 27 crates, and shipped them to Königsberg Castle in East Prussia, modern-day Kaliningrad, Russia. There, the room was reassembled and put on display as a trophy of war, a symbol of Nazi plunder. Then, in 1944, as the Allies bombed Königsberg and the Soviet Red Army closed in, the amber room vanished for the final time. The Nazi commander in charge of the castle's artifacts ordered it crated up again and moved to a secure location. This is where the trail goes completely cold. Was it destroyed in the fierce bombardment that leveled much of the city and the castle? Some historians believe it was simply lost to the fires of war. But the lack of any definitive physical evidence has fueled a far more tantalizing theory, that the crates were successfully hidden. Countless treasure hunters have searched for decades, convinced the room is still intact, hidden away in a forgotten cellar, a sealed salt mine, or a sunken ship in the Baltic Sea. The most prominent theory suggests it remains somewhere beneath the modern city of Kaliningrad, perhaps in a network of forgotten Nazi bunkers that were sealed after the war. Expeditions have searched lakes, tunnels, and ruins, following every possible clue and rumor, but the legendary Amber Room, a treasure valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars today, has never been found. Its disappearance remains one of history's most beautiful and tragic mysteries. While the Amber Room represents a theft by an invading army, our next treasure involves a daring heist born from the fires of revolution. It is a story that combines the chaos of a war for independence with the cold, calculated greed of a pirate who saw an opportunity too good to pass up. This is the saga of the Treasure of Lima, a haul so immense and so famously lost that it has turned a remote tropical island into the most hunted piece of real estate in the entire Pacific Ocean. As the Spanish Empire began to crumble in the early 19th century, its vast colonial holdings became battlegrounds. In Peru, the winds of revolution were blowing, and the royalist forces loyal to the Spanish crown knew the capital city of Lima was increasingly vulnerable. Fearing the revolutionary army led by General José de San Martin would soon sack the city, the Spanish viceroy made a desperate decision. He ordered the city's unimaginable wealth to be gathered and evacuated for safekeeping. And what a collection it was! From the sacred vaults of the Lima, a cathedral, and the homes of the city's wealthiest aristocrats came a king's ransom. A solid gold, 2-meter-tall statue of the Virgin Mary clutching a baby Jesus, her crown adorned with jewels, 113 gold religious sculptures, 200 chests filled with jewels, 273 swords with jeweled hilts, 1,000 diamonds. Countless crowns, chalices, and crucifixes of solid gold, and barrels overflowing with silver coins and ingots. In today's value, this collection was worth over $200 million. This mountain of treasure was loaded onto a single ship, the English merchant vessel Mary Dear, captained by a man named William Thompson. He was entrusted with sailing the treasure to the safety of Mexico, with a contingent of Spanish soldiers and priests aboard to guard the sacred cargo. It was a monumental display of trust placed in a foreigner. That trust was immediately and brutally betrayed. Once at sea, the temptation proved too great for Captain Thompson and his crew. They were not honorable merchants, they were pirates at heart. They overwhelmed and murdered the Spanish guards and priests, throwing their bodies overboard. With blood on their hands and a fortune in their hold, they now had a new problem: what to do with it all. They couldn't just sail into a port and start spending. The treasure was far too recognizable. They needed to hide it, and they needed to do so quickly. Their destination was a place long known to pirates as a perfect lair, Cocos Island. Located some 300 miles off the coast of Costa Rica, this remote volcanic island was a mist-shrouded paradise of steep cliffs, thick rainforest, and roaring waterfalls. It was isolated, uninhabited, and incredibly difficult to find, making it the ideal spot to bury a stolen fortune. According to the legend, Thompson and his crew spent several days on Cocos Island, hauling the heavy chests and sacred artifacts deep into the jungle. They supposedly chose a spot near a towering waterfall, perhaps using its constant roar to mask the sounds of their digging, and buried the entire treasure in a deep pit. They marked the location on a detailed map, planning to return once the heat had died down. Fate, however, had other plans. Their ship was soon captured by the Spanish Navy. Most of the crew were hanged for their crimes on the deck of their own vessel. But Captain Thompson and his first mate managed to bargain for their lives, promising to lead the Spanish back to the treasure in exchange for a pardon. They were taken aboard a Spanish ship and sailed back toward Cocos Island. As the story goes, a tremendous storm hit just as they approached. Seizing the opportunity, Thompson and his mate escaped overboard, swimming to the island and hiding in its impenetrable interior until the Spanish ship, battered by the weather, was forced to give up the search and leave. The two men were eventually rescued by a passing whaling ship, but the treasure remained behind, its precise location known only to them. Thompson allegedly gave his map to a friend, a man named John Keating, on his deathbed, and from that moment the hunt was on. For nearly 200 years, this legend has driven over 300 major expeditions to Cocos Island. Treasure hunters from all over the world, armed with old maps and even older stories, have scoured every inch of the terrain. They have dug massive holes, diverted waterfalls, and even used dynamite in their frantic search, all to no avail. Not a single gold coin or jeweled sword from the treasure of Lima has ever been officially recovered from the island. This complete lack of evidence has led many historians to a compelling alternative theory that the entire story is a magnificent myth. They argue that the treasure was most likely never buried on Cocos Island at all. It's possible the Mary Deer was intercepted and the treasure was reclaimed by Spanish authorities, its rediscovery kept secret. Or perhaps Captain Thompson, a clever pirate, simply sold it off piece by piece in ports across the world, inventing the tale of its burial to throw any pursuers off his scent. The enduring mystery of the treasure of Lima isn't just about whether it's still there. It's about whether it was ever there in the first place, a ghost of a fortune that continues to haunt the dreams of anyone who looks at a map and wonders what might lie buried beneath a distant waterfall. From the tropical mystery of Cocos Island, we journey now into the harsh, sun-baked desert of the American Southwest, where a different kind of legend has lured prospectors to their doom for over a century. This is not a story of pirates or plundered art, but of a solitary immigrant, a secret too valuable to share, and a landscape so treacherous it seems to guard its secrets with a vengeful fury. We are headed into the heart of Arizona's Superstition Mountains in search of the most infamous lost mine in history, the Lost Dutchman's gold mine. The tale begins not with a Dutchman but with a German. Jacob Waltz was born in Württemberg in 1810 and immigrated to the United States during the Gold Rush era, eventually finding his way to the Arizona Territory. By all accounts, he was a quiet, private man, a competent prospector, but by no means a wildly successful one. That is, until the final years of his life. In the 1870s and 80s, Waltz began appearing in the Phoenix area with something extraordinary, pockets full of incredibly rich gold ore. This wasn't just gold dust or small nuggets. This was high-grade ore, so pure that it was nearly solid gold, often still embedded in a distinctive white quartz. He would sell just enough to finance a comfortable but not extravagant lifestyle, then vanish back into the mountains for months at a time. When asked about the source of his wealth, he was evasive, offering only cryptic clues and warnings. He claimed to have a mine so rich that he could literally scoop the gold out with his hands, but he would never say exactly where it was. The mystery deepened on his deathbed in 1891. As the story goes, he finally gave a convoluted set of directions to his caretaker, Julia Thomas, a pie maker with whom he had a close friendship. The clues were a tantalizing but maddening puzzle. Look for a landmark called the Weaver's Needle. Find a trail no wider than a horse that leads to a cave you can only see at a certain time of day. Stand in the shadow of the needle at a specific hour to see the mine's entrance glow. Most importantly, he allegedly whispered that the mine was protected, that the spirits of the old Apache guardians would not allow it to be found. With these fragments of a map and a dream, Julia Thomas launched the first of countless expeditions into the superstitions. She found nothing but hardship, but she had successfully launched a legend that would only grow with each passing decade. The Dutchman part of the name is a simple American mispronunciation of Deutsch, meaning German. But the lost part is tragically accurate. Since Waltz's death, an estimated 8,000 people have tried to find his mine. Dozens have died in the attempt, succumbing to the mountain's brutal realities: triple-digit heat, venomous creatures, sudden flash floods, and treacherous, crumbling cliffs. Many of these deaths are simple accidents, the predictable outcome of unprepared people in an unforgiving wilderness. But a chilling number are outright mysterious, unsolved murders and disappearances that fuel the legend of a curse. There are stories of men found shot, their claims staked but their bodies robbed. Others simply vanish without a trace, their campsites left intact as if they were plucked from the earth. This string of tragedies has earned the Superstition Mountains a grim reputation, solidifying the idea that the mine is not just hidden, but actively and violently protected. But what if the legend is more than just a campfire story? Could a vein of gold that rich actually exist in those mountains? Geologically, the answer is a fascinating and resounding yes. The Superstition Mountains are not just random hills, they are the deeply eroded remains of a massive volcanic caldera. millions of years ago, superheated fluids rich in minerals like gold and silver were forced up through cracks and fissures in the Earth's crust. As these hydrothermal fluids cooled, they deposited their precious cargo, creating what geologists call epithermal veins. These can indeed be incredibly rich, with gold concentrations so high they seem almost unbelievable. Furthermore, the area does have a documented history of mining. The Peralta family from Mexico supposedly operated mines in the region in the 1840s before being attacked by Apaches, lending some historical credence to the idea of lost workings waiting to be rediscovered. This intersection of plausible geology and enduring myth is what makes the Lost Dutchman's mine so perpetually alluring. It's not a ghost story, it's a tangible puzzle with a potential payoff that is literally the stuff of dreams. Every few years, a new expedition claims to have deciphered Waltz's clues or found a new piece of evidence, from old Spanish maps to strange rock carvings. Yet the mountain never gives up its secret. The gold, if it ever existed in such a concentrated form, remains hidden, perhaps buried under a landslide, perhaps waiting in a shadowy canyon for the one person who can finally solve the Dutchman's riddle. It stands as a monument to human obsession, a testament to the powerful idea that incredible wealth might still be out there, waiting just beyond the next ridge for anyone brave or foolish enough to go and find it. After the harsh deserts and deadly mountains, we now venture into a different kind of treacherous landscape: the unpredictable, storm-racked seas that have claimed countless ships and their precious cargoes throughout history. And few shipwrecks hold a legend as rich or a story as heartbreakingly tragic as that of the Flor de la Mar. This wasn't just any ship, it was a floating fortress, a Portuguese carrack, and one of the largest, most magnificent vessels of its era, a veritable queen of the ocean. Her name, Flower of the Sea, evoked beauty and grace, but her fate would be one of brutal violence and insatiable greed, culminating in a loss that still makes treasure hunters' hearts beat faster. Launched in 1502, the Flor de la Mar was a behemoth, 400 tons of Portuguese naval engineering and power. She was over 118 feet long with a towering forecastle and aftcastle, and her 3 masts carried a vast spread of canvas that could drive her across the oceans. She had a storied career, participating in critical battles that established Portugal's empire in the Indian Ocean under the command of the legendary Afonso de Albuquerque, the Lion of the Seas. She was more than a warship, she was a symbol of Portugal's golden age of discovery, a floating piece of the nation's pride and ambition. But by 1511, after nearly a decade of hard service in tropical waters, her hull was strained and leaky, her timbers weary. She was meant to be retired, but fate and greed had other plans. The ship's final mission was to be her crowning achievement and her funeral dirge. Afonso de Albuquerque had just conquered the fabulously wealthy Sultanate of Malacca, a strategic hub of the spice trade. The plunder was beyond comprehension. For days, the hold of the Flor de la Mar was filled with a king's ransom, chests overflowing with gold and silver bars, sacks of precious diamonds, rubies, and emeralds, exquisite silks and artworks, and most lucratively, vast quantities of spices like nutmeg, cloves, and pepper, which were worth their weight in gold in European markets. There was also the personal treasure of the defeated sultan, including a magnificent solid gold throne and a bejeweled ceremonial table. Historical accounts suggest the total haul was enough to finance a kingdom, a treasure that would solidify Portuguese dominance for a century. Against his better judgment and the protests of his crew, Albuquerque chose the grand but unseaworthy Flor de la Mar to carry this immense fortune back to Portugal as a gift for King Manuel I, a triumphant proof of his victory. The decision was a catastrophic error, as the overladen ship, along with a small fleet, set sail from Malacca. It ran into a violent tropical storm in the Strait of Malacca. These waters are notoriously dangerous, a shallow and narrow channel where unpredictable winds and fierce currents have challenged sailors for centuries. The old ship, already leaking and now burdened by its incredible weight, was no match for the tempest. The caulking failed, the seams burst open, and the sea poured in. Despite the crew's desperate attempts to save her, the mighty carrack was driven onto a reef and broke in two. The exact location is still debated, but it is generally believed to have been somewhere off the coast of Sumatra. Albuquerque, a brilliant commander, survived the wreck by clinging to a raft, but he was forced to watch in horror as his greatest triumph and dozens of his men were swallowed by the raging sea. The fabulous treasure of Malacca sank to the bottom, scattered by the storm and buried in the silty seabed. For over 500 years, the Flor de la Mar has been the holy grail of shipwreck hunters, a siren's call luring them to one of the world's most difficult and busiest shipping lanes. The potential value is staggering, with estimates ranging wildly from $2 to $9 billion in today's currency. The challenge of recovering it, however, is immense. The Strait of Malacca is murky, with strong currents and a seabed that is constantly shifting. Furthermore, the precise location remains a mystery, with historical records providing only vague clues. This hasn't stopped the search. In the 1990s, the Indonesian government partnered with a Canadian marine salvage company, which claimed to have located the wreck site. They conducted limited excavations and even displayed what they said were recovered artifacts, including cannon and porcelain, though none of the legendary treasure ever materialized. Many historians and archaeologists are deeply skeptical of these claims, arguing the found wreck was likely a smaller, later Dutch vessel. The enduring fascination with the Flor de la Mar is more than just about gold and gems. It represents a pivotal moment in history, the dramatic rise of a European empire built on naval power and sheer audacity. Its loss was a tremendous blow to Portugal, a fortune that could have changed the course of history vanishing in a single night. The wreck is a time capsule from the very dawn of global colonialism, holding not just precious metals but the tangible proof of a world-changing conquest. It's a story of human ambition clashing with the indomitable power of nature, a reminder that the ocean is the greatest museum of all, guarding its secrets with a fierce and timeless resolve. While the Flor de la Mar represents a treasure lost to the fury of the sea, our next story involves a treasure deliberately and systematically destroyed by human hands in an act of political and ideological vengeance. We travel now to 17th century England, a nation torn apart by civil war, where the ultimate symbol of royal power and divine right was not stolen or hidden, but ordered to be broken, melted, and erased from history. This is the tragic fate of the original crown jewels of England, a collection of medieval splendor that fell victim to the hammer and the furnace. To understand the magnitude of this loss, we must first understand what these jewels represented. This was not merely a collection of gold and gemstones, it was the physical manifestation of the monarchy itself, a sacred regalia used in coronations for centuries. The most significant piece was the crown of St. Edward, often called the crown of Edward the Confessor. This wasn't just a crown, it was a relic, believed to have belonged to the Saint King who died in 1066. It was a solid gold circlet, heavily jeweled, and was used exclusively for the moment of coronation, the most sacred part of the ceremony. Other priceless items included the Tudor state crown, made for Henry VII or Henry VIII, which was studded with legendary gems like the Black Prince's ruby and a massive sapphire that was said to be from the ring of Edward the Confessor himself. There was the sovereign's orb, the jeweled scepters, the ampulla for the holy anointing oil, and the coronation spoon, each object steeped in centuries of ritual and believed to hold a divine sanction for the ruler's power. This very idea of divine right is what made them a target. The English Civil War, which raged from 1642 to 1651, was a brutal conflict between the royalist supporters of King Charles I and the parliamentarian forces, known as the Roundheads, led by Oliver Cromwell. For the Roundheads, the monarchy was not divinely ordained but a corrupt and tyrannical institution. after they defeated the king's forces and executed Charles I in 1649, the new Commonwealth government faced a practical problem and saw a powerful symbolic opportunity. The practical problem was money. The government was deeply in debt from funding the war. The symbolic opportunity was to forever break the idea of the magic of monarchy. What better way to do that than to physically destroy its most potent symbols? In 1649, Parliament issued an order for the total demolition and broken of all regalia and ornaments. It was an act of deliberate iconoclasm. The ancient coronation regalia was removed from Westminster Abbey and taken to the Tower of London, the very place where it would be guarded for centuries to come. But now it was not to be protected but dismantled. Skilled goldsmiths and jewelers were hired to carry out the task. The historic gems were pried from their settings. The magnificent gold crowns, including the revered crown of St. Edward, were placed into a furnace and melted down into bland, anonymous gold ingots. The ingots were then stamped and minted into coins, quite literally turning the symbol of absolute monarchy into common currency to fund the Republican government that had destroyed it. It was a breathtakingly effective piece of political theater, a message to the entire nation. The king is not only dead, but his very essence has been converted into cash for the new state. The official record states that almost every single item was destroyed, but such a complete and total obliteration of history has naturally fueled centuries of speculation and rumor. Could loyal royalists, heartbroken at the destruction, have managed to save even a small fragment? The most persistent story involves the historic coronation spoon. This 12th century spoon, used to anoint the monarch with holy oil, is the one piece of the pre-Civil War regalia that survives today. The official story is that it was simply sold off by the Commonwealth officials, who failed to recognize its immense ceremonial significance and was later bought back after the monarchy was restored. But a more romantic theory suggests a loyalist secretly purchased it or swapped it with a replica to preserve it, knowing its sacred importance would be overlooked by those who saw only its material value. Other tales whisper of other artifacts. Were some of the smaller gems smuggled out before the melting began? Did a goldsmith, unable to bring himself to destroy such beauty, substitute lesser metals for the historic gold and secret the originals away, waiting for a king's return? While there is no solid evidence to support these claims, they persist because the loss is so profound. We are not just missing objects, we are missing a direct, tangible link to the coronations of medieval and Tudor England. The crown jewels we see today in the tower are magnificent, but they are replacements, most of them crafted for the coronation of King Charles II in 1661 after the monarchy was restored. They are beautiful replicas of a lost original, a glorious echo of a history that was melted into coins and spent. A king's ransom dissolved into the economy of a nation trying to reinvent itself. The destruction of the original crown jewels remains one of history's most deliberate and calculated acts of cultural annihilation, a stark reminder that the most valuable treasures are often those whose loss we feel most deeply, precisely because they can never be recovered. From the deliberate destruction of England's royal regalia, we shift from lost symbols of power to a loss that represents something even more profound, the extinction of knowledge itself. If there is one lost treasure whose name evokes a universal pang of regret, a sense of what humanity could have been, it is the Great Library of Alexandria. This was not a treasure of gold or jewels, but of ideas. A repository for the entire world's knowledge, a beacon of learning whose dimming cast a shadow that some believe we have never truly emerged from. Founded in the 3rd century BC in the Egyptian city of Alexandria by Ptolemy I, a general of Alexander the Great, the library was far more than a building housing scrolls. It was the world's first known major research institution, an academic paradise. Its mission was breathtakingly ambitious, to collect a copy of every single book in the known world. agents of the Ptolemaic kings were dispatched to every port and market with vast sums of money, instructed to purchase any and all scrolls they encountered. But their methods went beyond mere commerce. Legend has it that any ships docking in Alexandria's harbor were boarded by library officials who would confiscate all scrolls on board, have them copied by the library's army of scribes, and then return the copies to the shipowners, keeping the precious originals for the library's collection. This aggressive, almost piratical approach to acquisition built a collection that was utterly unprecedented. Estimates of its holdings vary wildly, from 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls, representing the cumulative knowledge of Egyptian, Greek, Mesopotamian, Persian, Hebrew, and Indian civilizations. Within its halls, which were part of the larger museum or Temple of the Muses, the greatest minds of the ancient world were given the freedom to think, debate, and discover. It was here that the librarian Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth with astonishing accuracy by measuring the angles of shadows in two different cities. Here, Aristarchus of Samos proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system, placing the Sun at the center nearly 2,000 years before Copernicus. Heron of Alexandria invented prototypes of the steam engine and automatic doors. Physicians like Herophilus conducted groundbreaking human dissections, advancing anatomy in ways that would not be matched for over a millennium. The library was a crucible of innovation, a place where the scientific method was being born, and its loss represents not just the destruction of books, but the annihilation of entire paths of intellectual inquiry. The tragedy of the Library of Alexandria is that it did not perish in a single catastrophic event, but suffered a long, agonizing death by 1,000 cuts over centuries. The first major blow is often attributed to Julius Caesar in 48 BC. During his civil war against Pompey, Caesar found himself besieged in Alexandria. In a tactical move against the Egyptian fleet, he ordered his men to set fire to the ships in the harbor. The fires spread uncontrollably to the warehouses and parts of the city, and it is believed a significant number of scrolls stored in dockside warehouses for processing were consumed. Ancient writers like Plutarch and Seneca report the loss of 40,000 scrolls, a devastating number, but likely only a fraction of the main library's total collection. The library limped on for several more centuries, but it was a shadow of its former self, gradually decaying from neglect and further targeted attacks. Another often cited perpetrator is the Christian Emperor Theodosius I, who in 391 AD issued a series of decrees outlawing pagan practices. The Serapeum, a magnificent temple that may have housed a daughter library or a remaining portion of the main collection, was seen as a stronghold of paganism and was destroyed by a Christian mob led by the Patriarch Theophilus of Alexandria. While the exact number of scrolls lost in this event is debated, it was another brutal strike against the surviving classical knowledge. The final death knell is popularly, though controversially, blamed on the Muslim Caliph Omar. After the Arab conquest of Alexandria in 642 AD, a story relates that the general Amr ibn al-As wrote to the Caliph for instructions on what to do with the books. Omar reportedly replied, "If those books are in agreement with the Quran, we have no need of them, and if these are opposed to the Quran, destroy them." The scrolls were then allegedly used as fuel to heat the city's public baths, a destruction so vast it was said the fires burned for 6 months. However, many modern historians question the veracity of this account, which appears in much later sources, and suggest the library was likely already gone by this time. The truth is, the library succumbed to a slow decline fueled by shifting political powers, religious intolerance, and a declining interest in funding such an expensive institution. The true magnitude of the loss is almost incomprehensible. We are not just missing a few old books, we are missing entire civilizations. Imagine the plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. We have only 7 each out of over 100 they supposedly wrote. The complete histories of Rome by Livy are mostly fragments, the works of the foundational scientist Democritus, who theorized the existence of atoms, are entirely gone. We lost the Pinax, a massive catalogue of the library's holdings that was essentially the first comprehensive encyclopedia of human knowledge. The list is a heartbreaking catalogue of what-ifs. How much more advanced would our understanding of medicine, astronomy, and engineering be if that continuous thread of learning had not been severed? The burning of the Library of Alexandria symbolizes the fragility of knowledge, a stark reminder that progress is not inevitable and that the greatest treasure we can ever lose is our own history. Moving from the silent, scholarly void left by Alexandria's library, we plunge into a landscape of brutal heat, blinding dust, and the kind of raw, physical greed that has driven men to madness for centuries. Our next treasure is not a single lost object, but a legend born from the very earth itself. A story so potent it inspired one of the greatest novels and films ever made about the corrupting nature of gold. This is the search for the lost mines of the Sierra Madre, a tale where history and Hollywood myth are inseparably intertwined, and where the promise of a mountain of silver continues to lure modern prospectors into some of the most dangerous terrain on Earth. The legend was immortalized in 1948 by the classic film The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, starring Humphrey Bogart. In it, a trio of down-on-their luck American prospectors in Mexico hears stories of a lost gold mine in the mountains. They find it, extract a fortune in gold dust, and are then ultimately destroyed not by bandits or the elements, but by their own paranoia and greed. The film's famous line, "Badges. We ain't got no badges, we don't need no badges, I don't have to show you any stinking badges," has become part of our cultural lexicon, but the film and the novel by B. Traven that inspired it were themselves inspired by a very real and enduring set of legends about the Sierra Madre Mountains. The historical truth behind the fiction is arguably even more fascinating. During the Spanish colonial era, which stretched from the 16th to the early 19th century, northern Mexico was a vast, rugged, and incredibly rich mining district. The Spanish, using forced indigenous labor, discovered and worked countless veins of silver. They established remote mining camps high in the mountains, connected by perilous trails that were constantly threatened by Apache raids. One of the most persistent legends is that of the lost Teopa mine. Said to have been discovered by the Jesuits in the 16th century, Teopa was supposedly so rich that its silver was used to fund the Catholic Church's operations throughout the New World. To protect it from pirates and rival European powers, the Jesuits meticulously concealed the mine's entrance when they were expelled from the Spanish Empire in 1767. The stories describe a mine not just filled with silver, but containing a magnificent solid silver staircase and an entire church with bells cast from pure silver, all hidden away in a secluded valley. Another legendary site is the Lost Padre mine, often conflated with Teopa, but with its own distinct lore. This story tells of a benevolent Spanish padre who discovered a spectacularly rich outcropping of almost pure silver. He mined it secretly, using the wealth to help the local indigenous population, building missions and providing for the poor. Upon his death, he took the secret of the mine's location to his grave. These tales share common elements: unimaginable wealth, a compassionate or secretive founder, and a location that was deliberately lost to protect it from those who would misuse its treasure. So, could these mines actually exist? Geologically, the answer is a resounding yes. The Sierra Madre Occidental is one of the largest mineral-rich provinces in the world, a gigantic slab of volcanic rock created by massive eruptions millions of years ago. These geological processes are perfect for creating enormous epithermal veins of silver and gold. We know the Spanish were incredibly successful miners in the region. Real, documented cities like Zacatecas and Guanajuato were founded on silver strikes so vast they bankrolled the entire Spanish Empire for generations. The idea that an even richer, isolated mine was found and then lost in the vast, unmapped wilderness of the Sierra Madre is not just possible, it is probable. The mountains are a labyrinth of deep canyons known as barrancas, some deeper than the Grand Canyon, shrouded in jungle and incredibly difficult to access even with modern technology. It is the perfect place to lose a mine. This brings us to the modern-day treasure hunters, a special breed of individual who willingly walks into this beautiful but deadly landscape. The search is not for the faint of heart. The Sierra Madre is notoriously dangerous, known as a haven for drug cartels who run their operations from its remote folds. Potential explorers must contend not only with the natural threats of dehydration, venomous snakes, and treacherous trails, but also with the very real risk of violent confrontation. Despite these perils, expeditions are still mounted, armed with old maps, metal detectors, and a stubborn hope. Some searchers look for specific clues mentioned in the legends: a rock formation that looks like a face, a peculiar watermark on a canyon wall, or the ruins of an old Spanish arrastra, a primitive ore-grinding device. The most compelling evidence that something is out there comes from sporadic, tantalizing discoveries. There are accounts of prospectors stumbling upon ancient mine shafts shored up with weathered timbers that carbon date to the Spanish colonial period. Others have found old Spanish artifacts, a rusted helmet, a broken musket barrel, or a carved stone cross in locations that match the descriptions from centuries-old journals. Yet the mother lode, the legendary mine stuffed with silver bars or the fabled church bells, remains elusive. The mountains give up their small secrets but guard their greatest treasures fiercely. The true treasure of the Sierra Madre may not be the silver itself, but the enduring human spirit of exploration and the powerful, cautionary tale that some fortunes are so great they cannot be possessed without paying the ultimate price. While the loss of England's crown jewels was a deliberate act of political rebellion, the story of the Holy Roman Empire's regalia is one of slow dispersion and chaotic upheaval over 1,000 years of European history. This was not a single set of jewels, but a collection of the most sacred objects in Christendom, used to anoint and crown emperors, connecting their temporal power directly to divine will. At its heart were the Reichskleinodien, the imperial regalia, a group of items so potent they were believed to guarantee victory to whoever possessed them. And while the core collection survives today in Vienna, key pieces have been lost to time, their absence creating a void that has fueled speculation and intrigue for centuries. The most significant and revered of all these objects was the Holy Lance, also known as the Spear of Destiny. This was no ordinary weapon. Tradition held it was the very lance used by the Roman soldier Longinus to pierce the side of Christ as he hung on the cross. The lance itself was a composite relic. The core was an ancient iron spearhead, which was later fitted with a distinctive silver sleeve held in place by gold, silver, and copper wires. Embedded within this sleeve was what was claimed to be a nail from the true cross, making it a relic within a relic. Its power was legendary. Medieval chroniclers wrote that whoever held this lance and believed in its sanctity would hold the destiny of the world in their hands, commanding invincibility in battle. It passed through the hands of history's great figures, from the Emperor Constantine to Charles Martel, and most famously Charlemagne, who was said to have carried it through 47 victorious battles. He allegedly died only when he accidentally dropped it. For the Holy Roman emperors, the lance was the ultimate symbol of their God-given right to rule. It was carried before them in processions and into battle, a physical talisman of their authority. But its history is a turbulent one of theft, ransom, and constant movement as the empire's fortunes rose and fell. During the chaotic conflicts of the late Middle Ages and the 30 Years' War, the entire collection of regalia was frequently moved from city to city for safekeeping, often pawned to fund military campaigns. It was during these periods of transit and insecurity that other priceless items from the collection began to vanish. The exact inventory changed over time, but among the most significant losses are believed to be a portion of the true cross, a tooth of John the Baptist, and a fragment of the tablecloth from the Last Supper. These were not just jewels, they were fragments of the divine, and their disappearance was a spiritual catastrophe. So what happened to these missing relics? The theories are as complex as European history itself. One compelling possibility is that they were never truly lost, but rather quietly absorbed into other royal and ecclesiastical treasuries across the continent. During the Napoleonic Wars, as the Holy Roman Empire was formally dissolved in 1806, the regalia was smuggled out of Nuremberg to Vienna to prevent it from falling into the hands of the French emperor. It is entirely plausible that during previous moments of crisis, certain items were separated from the main collection and given to allied bishops or noble families for protection, only for those temporary guardians to later claim ownership or for the knowledge of their origin to be lost over generations. A cathedral treasury in Prague, a monastery in southern Germany, or a private aristocratic collection in Spain could, in theory, hold one of these sacred objects without even realizing its imperial provenance. Another, darker theory points to simple, opportunistic theft. The regalia was transported for centuries by soldiers, priests, and diplomats across a war-torn continent. A small, incredibly valuable relic could easily have been stolen by a guard or a servant and sold on the black market, its priceless historical significance overlooked by a buyer who saw only its material value in gold and gems. It could have been melted down, the jewels pried out and sold individually, its sacred form destroyed forever for a quick profit. This fate is the most tragic, as it represents not just a loss but a complete erasure of history. The enduring fascination with the lost elements of the imperial regalia, particularly the Holy Lance, stems from their unique nature. They were more than symbols of power, they were believed to be conduits of it. Their loss feels like a break in a sacred chain, a disconnect from a time when objects held profound spiritual meaning that could shape the fate of nations. While the crown, orb, and scepter in Vienna are magnificent to behold, the ghost of what is missing, the lance that touched the divine, the physical remnants of saints and apostles, haunts the collection. It is a reminder that the most powerful treasures are often those that are felt, not just seen, and that their absence can be as compelling as their presence. After centuries of searching for legendary treasures scattered across deserts, mountains, and forgotten islands, we now turn to a story where the legend is not only real, but was spectacularly found. Yet, even in this modern tale of discovery, the mystery is not entirely solved, for a significant portion of the fortune is still missing, waiting on the ocean floor. This is the saga of the Nuestra Señora de Atocha, a Spanish galleon whose name is now synonymous with both one of the greatest treasure finds in history and one of its most tantalizing remaining puzzles. The Atocha was not just any ship, she was the almiranta or rear guard vessel of a 28-ship Spanish treasure fleet sailing from Havana, Cuba to Spain in September of 1622. Her holds were packed with a staggering cargo representing the annual wealth of an empire. Official manifests, which historians believe recorded only the taxed royal treasure and not the considerable contraband smuggled to avoid the king's 20% cut, listed 24 tons of silver bullion in 1,038 ingots, 180,000 silver coins, 125 gold bars and discs, and 350 chests of indigo. Tobacco and copper, but the most breathtaking items were the emeralds, over 70 pounds of them, mined in present-day Colombia, including many large, uncut stones of extraordinary quality. In total, the registered treasure was valued at over $400 million in today's money, with the unregistered smuggled goods potentially doubling that figure. The fleet's journey home was immediately plagued by misfortune. They departed just as the hurricane season was reaching its peak. A mere 2 days into their voyage, a massive hurricane struck the Florida Keys. The Atocha, a bulky and notoriously slow sailor even in the best conditions, was overwhelmed. The storm drove her onto a coral reef, her hull was torn open, and she sank quickly in about 55 feet of water. Of the 265 people on board, only 5 survived by clinging to the mizzenmast, which remained above water. The other ships in the fleet, including the Santa Margarita, which also carried immense treasure, were scattered and wrecked as well. Spanish salvage crews arrived quickly and managed to recover the Margarita's treasure and some of the Atocha's cannons and anchors, but they could not locate the Atocha's main treasure hull. The exact coordinates were lost, and the greatest fortune of the fleet had seemingly vanished into the sea. For the next 350 years, the Atocha was the holy grail for a new generation of treasure hunters, its location a secret guarded by the shifting sands of the Florida Straits. Then a modern-day Quixote named Mel Fisher arrived on the scene. He was a former chicken farmer from Indiana who became utterly obsessed with finding the ship. For 16 long years, he and his family endured financial ruin, personal tragedy, and relentless skepticism from the scientific and salvage communities. Their search was a masterclass in persistence, fueled by meticulous research in the archives of the Indies in Seville, Spain, where Fisher's team pored over ancient Spanish documents to triangulate the possible wreck site. The breakthrough came in 1973 when they found a handful of silver bars that were confirmed to be from the Atocha, yet the mother lode remained elusive. The search turned tragic in 1975 when a salvage boat capsized, claiming the life of Mel's eldest son, Dirk, his wife, Angel, and a diver. Most would have given up, but Fisher, driven by the memory of his family, pressed on. Then, on July 20, 1985, the radio crackled with a message that would echo around the world. One of Fisher's divers, Andy Matrosi, surfaced and shouted the now famous words, "Put away the charts, we've found the main pile." They had done it. They had discovered the scattered remains of the Atocha's treasure hull. The find was beyond anyone's wildest dreams. There were silver bars stacked like cordwood, chests of exquisite silver coins, gorgeous gold artifacts, and that incredible hoard of muso emeralds from Colombia, some the size of hen's eggs. It was the mother of all shipwreck discoveries, validating a dream that had cost so much. But here is where our story takes a twist, because finding the main pile did not mean finding everything. The official Spanish manifests, combined with the accounts of survivors and salvors, tell us that a significant portion of the Atocha's treasure is still missing. When the ship broke apart on the reef, it did not sink as a single, neat package. The storm scattered the wreckage across the ocean floor. The stern castle, where the most valuable items, the passengers' personal wealth, the contraband, and the captain's safe, were likely stored, has never been found. This is the true remaining mystery of the Atocha. Historians and Mel Fisher's own company, which continues to search to this day, believe that somewhere out there, separated from the main wreck site, lie additional chests. We're talking about chests filled with uniquely carved and engraved gold bars intended for specific wealthy merchants in Seville, more of those magnificent Colombian emeralds, and priceless personal items like gold chains, religious jewelry, and silverware belonging to the aristocrats and dignitaries on board. The hunt for this missing treasure continues, a testament to the fact that even the most successful discovery can leave behind a ghost. The ocean is a vast and efficient hiding place, and the Atocha's stern, with its separate treasure room, may still be buried deep under sand and silt, its coordinates waiting for a new generation of technology and dreamers to finally reveal the ship's last great secret. Yet, even as the Atocha's final secrets wait beneath the waves, another Spanish treasure fleet met an equally grim fate in the very same waters, leaving behind a mystery that has proven even more impenetrable. While the 1622 fleet was struck by a hurricane, the 1715 fleet was utterly annihilated by one. This was the famed Plate Fleet, or Flota de Plata, and its sinking off the coast of Florida represents one of the greatest single losses of treasure in maritime history. 11 galleons were dashed against the reefs in a storm of biblical fury, scattering their colossal wealth along what is now known as Florida's Treasure Coast. And while modern hunters have recovered millions from the wrecks of ships like the Urca de Lima and the Capitana, one vessel stands apart for its complete and total disappearance: the legendary flagship, the Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, known more commonly as the San Miguel. The San Miguel was the crown jewel of the fleet, the Capitana Real, and by all accounts it carried the most extraordinary cargo. While other ships were laden with registered silver and gold for the crown, the San Miguel's secured strongrooms were reserved for the truly unique and priceless items. This wasn't just bulk treasure, it was a curated collection of New World opulence. Historical manifests and survivor accounts describe a hoard that makes even the Atocha's find seem commonplace by comparison. It contained an entire year's worth of pearls from the fisheries of Venezuela, including the famed Pearl of the Americas, a gem the size of a pigeon's egg. There were solid gold religious artifacts destined for the cathedrals of Spain, a life-sized crucifix, chalices, and monstrances studded with emeralds. Most hauntingly, it was said to be carrying a consignment of unique jewelry belonging to the highest nobility, including a wedding dress for the queen, woven with gold and silver threads and sewn with flawless diamonds. This was treasure with a personality, each piece with its own story and origin, making its loss a cultural catastrophe far beyond its staggering material value. The fleet's doom was sealed from the outset. It had been delayed for years in Havana due to war and other complications, forcing its departure into the most dangerous part of hurricane season. Just a week after setting sail for Spain, on July 31, 1715, the fleet was overtaken by a monstrous hurricane off the coast of Florida. The winds were so powerful they stripped the bark from trees onshore. The San Miguel, being one of the largest and most heavily laden ships, was hit hardest. Eyewitness accounts from survivors of other wrecks describe seeing the flagship lifted by a massive wave and then driven bodily into the deep, vanishing from sight in a matter of moments. Unlike the other 10 wrecks, which were scattered along roughly 40 miles of coastline, the San Miguel left no debris field, no floating bodies, and no telltale markers. It simply disappeared into the stormy abyss as if it had never existed. This complete absence of a trace is what has cemented the San Miguel's status as the ultimate ghost ship of the Treasure Coast. For decades, salvors who worked the other wrecks under contract with the Spanish crown searched for any sign of it but found nothing. In the modern era, legendary hunters like Kip Wagner, who pioneered the rediscovery of the 1715 fleet in the 1960s, have used every technological advancement available. Magnetometers, side-scan sonar, and advanced scuba gear have mapped the seafloor for miles, leading to the spectacular discovery of other fleet wrecks and countless coins and artifacts. Gold and silver from the fleet still wash ashore after particularly strong storms, a constant tease for beachcombers, but the San Miguel has guardedly kept its secret. The prevailing theory among historians and salvors is that the ship did not break up on the shallow reefs like the others. Instead, it was driven intact into the deep waters of the Gulf Stream, where it sank rapidly into a deep underwater canyon or was buried under centuries of shifting sand in an area yet to be surveyed. Its wooden hull would have long since disintegrated, leaving only the durable treasure and cannon as clues, hidden in a vast and murky wilderness. The ongoing search for the San Miguel is perhaps the most romantic and frustrating quest in all of treasure hunting. It represents the last great prize of the most famous lost fleet, a collection of unique historical artifacts that would rewrite our understanding of Spanish colonial art and craftsmanship. Finding another silver coin is one thing. Finding the Queen's diamond-studded wedding dress or the solid gold crucifix is the dream that keeps divers braving strong currents and limited visibility. The mystery endures not because there's no treasure left to find, but because the greatest treasure of all remains out there somewhere, a silent, sovereign secret held by the sea, waiting for the day when a storm or a search finally reveals its royal resting place. While the sea has claimed its share of royal fortunes and sunken galleons, one of history's most baffling treasure maps was found not underwater, but in a dry, dusty cave high above the Dead Sea. Among the famous Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient religious manuscripts that revolutionized our understanding of the Bible, there was one that stood entirely apart. It wasn't a sacred text, a psalm, or a book of prophecy. It was a list, known as the Copper Scroll. This document is perhaps the most enigmatic treasure guide ever discovered, because it doesn't just describe a single hoard. It meticulously details 64 different caches of gold and silver, presenting a puzzle that has frustrated and fascinated experts for decades. What makes the Copper Scroll so instantly unique is its very medium. Unlike the other Dead Sea Scrolls, which were written on parchment or papyrus, this one was inscribed on thin sheets of copper alloy and then rolled up. This choice of material was highly unusual and incredibly deliberate. Copper was expensive and difficult to work with. The author went to this great trouble for one simple reason: they wanted this document to last. This wasn't a message for a generation. It was a record meant to endure for millennia, preserving its secrets against the ravages of time. When it was discovered in 1952 in Cave 3 near Qumran, it was far too corroded and brittle to unroll. For years, its contents remained a mystery, a secret locked inside a metal shell. Scientists eventually had to carefully cut it into 23 separate strips to finally read the text inside, revealing its incredible nature. The contents were startling. Written in a form of Hebrew different from the other scrolls, it reads like a dry inventory log from an ancient warehouse manager, but for a warehouse of unimaginable wealth. It lists 64 specific hiding places, and the amounts described are almost fantastical. We're not talking about a few coins here and there. The scroll describes tons of gold and silver, along with precious perfumes, priestly vestments, and other sacred vessels. For example, one entry might state, "In the ruin that is in the valley of Achor, under the steps that go down to the east 40 cubits, a chest of silver and its vessels." Weight 17 talents, the sheer volume is mind-boggling. If taken at face value, the total tally amounts to over 120 tons of gold and silver. To put that in perspective, it would represent a significant portion of the entire ancient world's precious metal supply, a hoard so vast it seems to defy belief. This immediately presents the central, burning question that has divided scholars since the day the scroll was deciphered. Is this a literal, factual map to a real treasure, or is it something else entirely? The sheer scale of the treasure is the biggest point of contention. Skeptics argue that no single entity in the region, not even King Solomon at the height of his power, could have possessed such staggering wealth. They propose that the scroll is a work of fiction, perhaps a piece of folklore or a religious allegory. The treasures, in this view, might be symbolic, representing spiritual blessings or the lost treasures of the temple that were hoped to be restored in a messianic age. The precise instructions they suggest are a literary device, not a practical guide. On the other side are those who believe the scroll is a genuine treasure map. Their theory often connects the treasure to the Great Jewish Revolt against the Romans between 66 and 70 AD. As the Roman legions advanced on Jerusalem, the Jewish rebels would have had a powerful motive to hide the vast wealth of the temple and the city's aristocracy to prevent it from being looted. The Copper Scroll, then, could be a meticulous record created by a priest or a treasurer of where these emergency caches were buried, written on durable copper to ensure the knowledge would survive the coming destruction. The cryptic language and obscure landmarks could have been a deliberate security measure to keep the locations secret from the enemy, should the scroll fall into the wrong hands. This debate has naturally inspired real-world quests. Numerous archaeological expeditions have been launched to follow the scroll's clues. The directions, however, are maddeningly vague to modern eyes. They reference landmarks, valleys, and ruins that had clear meaning 2,000 years ago but are now lost to history. One major expedition in the 1960s, led by scholar John Allegro, followed the scroll's instructions to a specific tunnel system. Their excavation, fraught with difficulty and danger, ultimately found nothing but an empty channel. Other searches have been equally fruitless. The challenges are immense. The landscape has changed dramatically over 2 millennia, with erosion, earthquakes, and human development obscuring or destroying the ancient signpost. The enduring allure of the Copper Scroll lies in this perfect storm of mystery. It possesses the thrilling specificity of a real treasure map with precise measurements and locations, yet the treasure it describes feels almost mythical in its scale. It is a tangible artifact that promises an impossible fortune, a metal message from the past that taunts us with its secrets. Whether it is a historical record of a lost national treasury or a profound religious text waiting to be fully understood, it stands as a unique monument to the human desire to hide, to seek, and to believe that incredible wealth, whether material or spiritual, is still out there, waiting just 40 cubits down, if only we could read the map correctly. From the sacred riddles of the Copper Scroll, we now journey to a much more recent and deeply American mystery, one born not from ancient scripture but from the ashes of a nation divided. In the final, chaotic days of the American Civil War, as the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia, fell to Union forces, one of the greatest unsolved financial mysteries in U.S. history was unfolding. This is the story of the lost treasure of the Confederacy, a fortune in gold and silver that simply vanished, leaving behind a trail of rumors, buried chests, and tales of secret missions that continue to captivate historians and treasure hunters to this day. The story begins in early April 1865. The Confederate cause was clearly lost. General Robert E. Lee's army was starving and desperate, retreating from Petersburg. President Jefferson Davis and his cabinet knew they had to evacuate Richmond immediately, but they couldn't just leave the nation's wealth behind. The Confederate treasury, held in the vaults of the Confederate States Capitol building, was not just government money. It was the lifeblood of any potential government in exile, funds that could be used to continue the fight from elsewhere or to help rebuild after the war. So they ordered it moved. The treasure was loaded onto a special train under the guard of Navy Captain William H. Parker. The cargo was a staggering mix of assets: heavy kegs filled with Mexican silver dollars, gold coins from European loans, silver bricks, and perhaps most intriguingly, valuable jewelry and fine gold tableware donated by patriotic Southern families to fund their fledgling nation. Estimates of its total value at the time range from $500,000 to over $1 million in specie, a sum worth tens of millions today. This treasure train left Richmond on its perilous journey south. Its ultimate destination hoped to be somewhere safe, deep in the Confederate heartland. The plan was to meet up with President Davis and his fleeing cabinet, but the journey was a nightmare of confusion and constant threat. Union cavalry patrols were scouring the countryside, and the railroad lines were often cut or controlled by the enemy. The train made it to Danville, Virginia, and then pressed on into North Carolina, its precious cargo being transferred between wagons and trains as the situation deteriorated. With each passing day, the situation grew more desperate. Then came the news that shattered all remaining hope. General Lee had surrendered his army of Northern Virginia at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9th. The Confederate government was now not just fleeing, it was dissolving. It is in this atmosphere of panic and disintegration that the treasure begins to disappear. Official records become scarce and contradictory. The most persistent and romantic theory centers on Danville, Virginia, and later Georgia. As the officials in charge of the treasury realized capture was imminent, the story goes that they decided to hide it. Under cover of darkness, they allegedly buried chests of gold and silver in the countryside near Danville, or perhaps along the route further south. Another prominent theory points to Washington, Georgia, a small town that became the final meeting place for the collapsing Confederate government. It was here that the last of the treasury was officially accounted for and dispersed. A portion was given to naval officers to pay their men who were still believed to be en route. But a significant amount was simply unaccounted for after this point. Did nervous officials, fearing they would be caught with the wealth of a vanquished nation, bury it in the Georgia clay, intending to come back for it later? Many believe so, and the area around Washington, Georgia, has been a hotspot for treasure hunters ever since. But there is a more shadowy and compelling theory that goes beyond simple burial. Some historians argue that not all of the treasure was meant to be saved for a later day. Some of it was meant to be used immediately to fuel a continuing struggle. This theory suggests a portion of the treasury was funneled into a secret network often called the Golden Circle, or was used to fund the rise of the first incarnation of the Ku Klux Klan. The money in this narrative was used to finance a clandestine war against Reconstruction, to intimidate newly freed slaves, and to undermine the Union's victory through economic and terrorist means rather than open battle. This transforms the lost treasure from a simple cache of coins into a dark seed that helped sow decades of racial strife and violence. An even more expansive international theory suggests that some of the gold made it out of the country entirely. Could it have been smuggled to England or Canada to fund a government in exile that never materialized? Were some of the assets used to establish secret bank accounts that would help former Confederate leaders live comfortably in exile? There is some historical evidence of Confederate operatives overseas, and the idea that a financial shadow of the South persisted long after the guns fell silent is a powerful and sinister notion. The fate of the Confederate treasury remains one of history's great unresolved puzzles because it is so multifaceted. It's a story of a physical treasure that might still be buried in a southern field, waiting for a lucky metal detectorist to stumble upon a rusted chest full of silver coins. But it is also a story about the lost cause mythology itself, a symbolic treasure of what the South believed it was fighting for. The disappearance of the money mirrors the disappearance of the nation it represented, vanishing not with a formal surrender but in a fog of defeat and disorder. Whether it lies hidden in a forgotten pit or was spent to fuel a 100-year legacy of resistance, the lost treasure of the Confederacy is a ghost of the Civil War, a tangible reminder that some conflicts don't end with a signed treaty, but simply fade away, leaving their riches and their scars hidden just beneath the surface. From the vanished wealth of a failed rebellion, we turn to the catastrophic collapse of one of the world's most powerful empires and the fate of its unimaginable riches. The story of the Romanov family's execution in 1918 is well known, a grim and bloody end to 3 centuries of rule. But surrounding that tragedy is a far larger mystery concerning the immense state treasures of Imperial Russia. A fortune in historical regalia, priceless art, and unique jewels that simply vanished into the chaos of the revolution. This isn't about the personal diamonds sewn into the hems of the Grand Duchess's dresses. This is about the very symbols of the Tsar's power, the crown jewels of a vast empire, and what happened to them when that empire ceased to exist. Following the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II in March 1917, the provisional government that took power found itself in possession of the imperial regalia, a collection of breathtaking historical and monetary value. These items were not just pretty trinkets, they were the physical manifestation of the Russian state itself, used in coronations for centuries. The most significant piece was the imperial crown of Russia, created for Catherine the Great's coronation in 1762. This magnificent headpiece was a masterwork of thousands of diamonds, including a magnificent central spinel weighing almost 400 carats, all set in silver and gold. Then there was the imperial scepter, which famously holds the Orlov diamond, a 189-carat monster of a gem stolen from a Hindu temple and presented to Catherine by her lover, Count Orlov. The imperial orb, countless diamond-studded orders and medals, and the historic nuptial crown of the Tsarinas completed this dazzling array of power and prestige. Understanding the sheer scale of this collection is key. It was housed in the diamond room of the Winter Palace and was considered one of the most valuable collections of its kind in the world. But the new Bolshevik government, which seized power in October 1917, viewed these treasures with contempt. To them, these jewels were the ultimate symbols of the oppressive autocracy they had just overthrown. More pragmatically, they were also a potential financial lifeline for their fledgling and cash-strapped state, surrounded by enemies and on the brink of a brutal civil war. The official Bolshevik position was to liquidate the people's property to fund the world revolution. What happened next is a story of secrecy, confusion, and conflicting accounts. The treasures were moved from Petrograd to the relative safety of the Kremlin armory in Moscow. In 1921, a commission was tasked with cataloging the items, many of which were dismantled. Gems were pried from their historical settings, separated from the very art and history that gave them meaning, and evaluated solely by their carat weight. The most famous items, like the crown, scepter, and orb, were kept intact due to their immense symbolic value even to the new regime. Over the next several years, a secretive organization called Gokran oversaw the sale of these assets on the international market. This is where the trail becomes murky and the mystery deepens. While many items were officially sold often at a fraction of their true value to opportunistic Western dealers, a persistent and compelling theory suggests that not everything made it to the auction block. Faced with the horrifying prospect of selling Russia's national heritage, did loyalist officials within the Bolshevik government or sympathetic curators at the armory secretly divert some of the most significant items? The most tantalizing missing pieces are the unique Fabergé creations, specifically the celebrated imperial Easter eggs. Of the 50 known eggs created for the royal family, 8 remain unaccounted for to this day. These were not merely jeweled eggs, they were mechanical marvels containing miniature surprises, each one a unique masterpiece of the jeweler's art. Their highly personal nature might have made them harder to sell discreetly, leading to them being hidden away in a secret Kremlin vault or, as some speculate, smuggled out of the country by white Russian immigrants. Another layer of the mystery involves the imperial regalia used in earlier coronations, items that predated Catherine the Great. Pieces like the cap of Monomaque, the ancient crown of the Muscovite Tsars, were considered historical artifacts rather than just jewels, and may have been protected from the asset stripping by historians. Could these older, less dazzling but historically irreplaceable objects have been secreted away by academics appalled at the destruction? Furthermore, rumors have swirled for decades that a Red Arrow train loaded with crates of imperial treasure was sent on a secret mission to secure funding from socialist allies in Europe, only to be intercepted, lost, or its contents dispersed under mysterious circumstances. The search for the Tsar's lost treasure has taken many forms. In the West, Fabergé eggs and Romanov jewels have periodically surfaced at auctions, their provenance often vague and shrouded in the discreet silence of the art world, leaving one to wonder if they were part of the official sales or something more clandestine. In Russia itself, as Soviet-era archives have slowly opened, historians have scoured documents looking for discrepancies in the official inventories, searching for the ghost of a transaction that never happened, or a crate that was logged in but never logged out. The most romantic hope is that a hidden trove still exists, perhaps walled up in the labyrinthine basements of the Kremlin or buried on a country estate, waiting to be rediscovered, a glittering and ghostly reminder of a lost world of imperial splendor that was not sold off for cash, but saved from the flames of revolution by those who still believed in its majesty. But for all the imperial grandeur lost to revolution, Our next treasure emerges from a far darker chapter of human history, one shrived not in ancient dust but in the cold, deep waters of an Austrian alpine lake. High in the Salzkammergut Mountains lies Lake Toplitz, a body of water so serene and picturesque it seems plucked from a postcard. Yet beneath its mirror-like surface lies a legacy of profound evil and enduring mystery, a submerged archive of the Third Reich's most desperate and clandestine schemes. This isn't a treasure of gold for wealth's sake, but a hidden cache of tools for economic warfare, and perhaps something far more sinister, dumped into the depths by a collapsing regime intent on hiding its secrets. The Nazis chose Lake Toplitz not for its beauty but for its brutal utility. Its remote, mountainous location made it incredibly difficult to access, a natural fortress. More importantly, the lake itself is a death trap for the uninitiated. Though not exceptionally wide, it is deceptively deep, plunging to over 100 meters. Below a depth of 20 meters, the water becomes completely anoxic, devoid of oxygen. This unique environment prevents decay and corrosion, perfectly preserving anything sunk within it. Furthermore, the lower layers are a tangled nightmare of sunken logs, a legacy of the old timber industry, creating an underwater forest that has ensnared and drowned multiple divers. For the SS officials who oversaw the operation in the final days of the war, it was the ideal safe, deep, remote, and lethally guarded by nature itself. The first major recoveries in the 1950s confirmed the lake's dark purpose and sent shockwaves through the financial world. Divers, braving the extreme depths and lethal snags, brought up crate after crate filled with millions of pounds worth of counterfeit British currency. This was the tangible evidence of Operation Bernhard, one of the most ambitious economic warfare plots in history. The Nazi plan, orchestrated by SS Major Bernhard Kruger, was diabolically simple: collapse the British economy by flooding the global market with perfect fake banknotes. They assembled a team of Jewish counterfeiters from concentration camps, forced to use their skills under the threat of death. These artisans produced near-flawless forgeries, so good that even the Bank of England struggled to tell them apart from the real thing. The plan was never fully realized, and as the Allies advanced, the Nazis scrambled to hide the evidence, dumping the printing plates and billions of pounds in fake notes into Lake Toplitz to erase their crime. But the counterfeit money may just be the beginning, the decoy that distracts from a far greater mystery. Over the decades, subsequent expeditions have pulled other chilling artifacts from the depths: crates of brand new weapons, parts for highly advanced V-2 rockets, and detailed documentation from the Nazi naval testing station that was once located on the lake's shore. Each discovery fuels the most compelling theory of all, that the lake holds the key to the Nazis' infamous missing gold. As the Third Reich fell, vast quantities of gold, looted from central banks across Europe and stolen from victims of the Holocaust, vanished. Did SS officers, acting on orders or for their own benefit, load gold bars into crates identical to those holding the counterfeit notes and sink them into the anoxic depths of Toplitz? The lake's perfect preservation properties make it an ideal hiding place for such a dense, valuable material. The search for answers has come at a terrible cost, earning Lake Toplitz a grim reputation as a diver's graveyard. The combination of extreme depth, freezing temperatures, zero visibility in the murky lower layers, and the labyrinth of sunken timber has claimed multiple lives. In 1963, a German diver named Alfred Egner became entangled in the logjam and drowned. His death cast a long shadow over the lake, a stark warning of the physical dangers that mirror the moral darkness of what lies below. Modern searches using remote-operated vehicles and miniature submarines have been more successful, mapping the treacherous bottom and locating more crates, but the lake has yet to give up all its secrets. The enduring fascination with Lake Toplitz is not merely a treasure hunt. It is a forensic investigation into the mechanics of a monstrous regime. Every crate recovered is a piece of historical evidence, helping to complete the puzzle of the Knights' final days. The lake is a silent, cold witness holding onto its most sensitive secrets, making us wonder if the greatest treasure to be found there is not gold, but the final, undeniable proof of a history we must never forget. Yet even as we ponder the dark, preserved secrets of Lake Toplitz, our next tale veers into a territory that is at once sacred and sinister, where faith collides with greed in one of history's most peculiar treasure legends. This is the story of the treasure of the Lim at Jesus figurines, a mystery that proves a treasure map doesn't need to be drawn on parchment or copper to be deadly. It can be hidden in plain sight, encoded within objects of profound religious devotion. It's a saga that begins not with a chest of gold, but with a collection of small, seemingly innocent statues, and the promise they hold has lured men to their doom for generations. The story erupts into public view in the early 1960s when a man named Valverde, a direct descendant of a Spanish conquistador, steps forward with an incredible claim. He possesses a set of small, antique Jesus figurines, heirlooms passed down through his family for centuries. According to his telling, these were not mere religious icons, they were the key to a fortune. His ancestor, the original Valverde, had been a soldier serving in the Spanish conquest of South America. As the tale goes, this conquistador had not only helped quell a native uprising, but had also saved the life of a local chieftain. Out of gratitude, the chieftain revealed to him the secret location of a vast Inca treasure hoard, a cache of gold so immense it had been hidden from the ravages of the conquistadors themselves. To ensure the secret would never be lost, the location was not written down. Instead, it was encoded into a series of clues concealed within the design of these very figurines. The figurines themselves were described in tantalizing detail. They were not uniform, each one was unique, carved from a dark, aged wood and depicting Jesus or various saints in different poses. The true map, Valverde claimed, was in the specific positioning of the figures. When arranged in a precise, secret sequence, their outstretched arms, the direction of their gazes, and the objects they held would point the way across a treacherous landscape. One figure's finger might indicate a specific mountain peak on the horizon. The angle of a cross held by another would provide a bearing to follow. A third, holding a small orb, might represent a distinctive round rock formation that served as the next marker. It was a three-dimensional map, a puzzle box made of sacred art, and it was said to lead to a valley filled with gold, a place the locals called Dangangates. And this is where the story takes its first dark turn. The Dangangates mountain range in Ecuador is a place of nightmare beauty and palpable danger. It is a mist-shrouded wilderness of sheer cliffs, dense, cloud-soaked jungles, and sudden, bone-chilling fog that can descend without warning. The terrain is so challenging and the weather so unpredictable that even experienced explorers and modern GPS systems are frequently defeated by it. This was the gauntlet that any seeker of the Valverde fortune would have to run. The first to try was the descendant Valverde himself. He organized an expedition, confident in his family's secret. He and his party ventured into the Dangangates following the clues from the figurines. They were never seen again. The mountains had claimed the first victims of the Jesus figurines, swallowing the man and his secret hole and cementing the treasure's cursed reputation. But the legend refused to die. It was picked up by a series of other treasure hunters, each hoping to succeed where Valverde had failed. Perhaps the most famous was an American explorer named Stanley Hall, who in the 1980s became fascinated by the story. He partnered with a Scottish engineer and seasoned adventurer named Ian Robb, and together they mounted a major expedition. They pored over historical records, studied maps, and even claimed to have located a potential descendant of Valverde's who might have more information. They ventured into the Dangangates with better equipment and preparation than any team before them. For a time, they sent back optimistic reports, then silence. Ian Robb was found dead in his tent, the victim of a sudden and massive cerebral hemorrhage. His death in that remote and foreboding place felt like more than just a tragic accident to those who heard the story. It felt like a warning, another life claimed by the unforgiving curse of the treasure. Stanley Hall, shaken but undeterred, continued to search for years afterward, but he never found the gold. This string of misfortunes and deaths inevitably raises the critical question: is any of this real? The treasure of the Lim, a Jesus figurine, sits at a confusing crossroads between plausible history and elaborate hoax. On one hand, the historical context is solid. The Spanish did plunder immense quantities of Inca gold, and it is entirely believable that the Incas managed to hide some of their wealth in the remote, inaccessible mountains to keep it from their conquerors. The Danganats Range is a perfectly logical place for such a hiding spot. The concept of a coded map is also not far-fetched. The Incas had a complex system of record-keeping using knotted cords called quippers, so the idea of encoding information within art is not a huge leap. On the other hand, the evidence for the figurines themselves is frustratingly thin. No clear, uncontested photograph of the complete set has ever been published. Descriptions of them vary from account to account. Many historians and skeptics argue that the entire story was a magnificent con, perhaps invented by the original Valverde descendant to attract wealthy backers for a fruitless mining expedition, or simply a folktale that grew in the telling over centuries. The deaths, while tragic, can be logically explained by the extreme perils of the Danganats environment itself, a place that doesn't need a supernatural curse to be lethal. The real treasure, they say, is not gold, but the enduring power of a good story, a story that promises such immense reward that it continues to override the very rational fear of a gruesome death. Ultimately, the lasting power of this mystery lies in its unique fusion of the sacred and the profane. It takes objects of pure faith and transforms them into tools for finding worldly wealth. It suggests that the greatest secrets are not buried under the ground, but are hidden in the open, waiting for someone with the key to see the map that everyone else overlooks. Whether the Lim, a Jesus figurines, are a genuine guide to an Inca king's ransom or simply a beautiful and deadly fairy tale, they continue to hold a powerful allure. They represent the ultimate treasure hunter's dream, that the clue is right there in your hands, and that with enough faith and enough courage, you alone can decipher it and claim the prize that has eluded so many others. Yet for all the spiritual intrigue of encoded figurines, our next treasure trades sacred mystery for the raw, tangible allure of gold bars stacked in a hidden cave. It's a story that feels ripped from the pages of a Wild West pulp novel, complete with a remote mountain, a secret entrance, and a cast of characters whose lives were consumed, and often ended, by a fortune they could never quite lay claim to. This is the legend of Victorio Peak, a barren and unassuming hill in the deserts of New Mexico that has become the epicenter of one of America's most contentious and enduring treasure hunts. The story begins, as so many do, with a lone prospector and a lucky break. In 1937, a man named Milton Doc Noss was out deer hunting with his wife over on the vast, desolate plains of the White Sands Missile Range. As the tale goes, Doc was chasing his wounded quarry when he stumbled upon a narrow, vertical crevice in the side of the mountain. Curious, he dropped a stone into the opening and heard it clatter down for a surprisingly long time. He returned later with a rope and a lantern, lowering himself into the darkness. What he found at the bottom would define and ultimately destroy his life. He claimed to have discovered a vast, multi-chambered cavern, its floor literally paved with gold bars, stacks of skeletal remains still clad in conquistador armor, ancient religious artifacts, and chests overflowing with jewels and coins. He allegedly retrieved a single gold bar as proof, a brick so heavy it took all his strength to haul it back to the surface. From that moment, Doc Noss's life became a frantic, paranoid scramble to extract his find. The entrance was too narrow, so he used a small amount of dynamite to widen it, an act that, according to legend, triggered a cave-in that sealed the main chamber forever. Undeterred, he spent the next several years trying to raise capital and equipment to dig his way back in, showing his gold bar to potential investors and drawing cryptic maps of the cavern's layout. But the fortune seemed to be cursed. Doc's partnership soured into bitter lawsuits and violent threats. The situation reached its tragic climax in 1949, when Doc was shot and killed by one of his own business partners during a heated argument over the treasure's ownership. The man was acquitted, claiming self-defense, and the secret of the exact location, if it ever existed, seemingly died with Doc Noss. Yet the story was far from over. In 1955, a new figure emerged, reigniting the fever dream. A Texas oilman named Charlie Ryan heard the legend and became obsessed. He claimed to have discovered a secret map among Doc Noss's old belongings, and after securing a mining lease from the government, launched a massive excavation effort. Ryan's operation was everything Noss's wasn't: well-funded, heavily equipped, and highly publicized. He brought in heavy machinery, drilled deep shafts into the mountain, and even appeared on television shows to promote his quest. His team did make some intriguing finds, including old Spanish-era tools, a handful of gold coins, and what appeared to be the skeletal remains Noss had described. But the legendary main chamber, with its floor of gold bars, remained frustratingly out of reach. Ryan's venture eventually went bankrupt, leaving behind little more than a deeper hole and a reinforced myth. The plot thickened considerably with the involvement of the U.S. Army. In 1942, the federal government seized over 3 million acres of land, including Victoria Peak, to establish the White Sands Proving Ground, which later became the White Sands Missile Range. This placed the entire mountain squarely inside a top-secret military installation, a forbidden zone used for testing rockets and, later, nuclear weapons. This development transformed the treasure hunt from a private endeavor into a protracted legal and bureaucratic war. Treasure hunters now needed explicit permission from the U.S. Army to even set foot on the land, and the military, citing both national security and the potential danger of unexploded ordnance, was exceedingly reluctant to grant it. This led to decades of sensational claims, clandestine raids, and high-stakes lawsuits. Throughout the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, various groups and individuals, often descendants of Doc Noss, sued the federal government, alleging that the army was secretly removing the treasure for itself. These claims were fueled by rumors of mysterious nighttime excavations by military personnel and the sudden appearance of classified restrictions on specific areas of the base. The Army has consistently denied these allegations, maintaining that no such treasure has ever been found. The legal battles became a circus of hearsay and circumstantial evidence, with treasure hunters presenting their theories in court while the government stood behind the impenetrable wall of national security. So what is the truth behind Victoria Peak? Geologists point out that while New Mexico has a rich history of gold and silver mining, the specific area around the peak is not known for the kind of massive gold deposits described in the legend. Skeptics argue that Doc Noss's original gold bar was likely a clever fake, a prop used to lure investors into a classic mining scam. They suggest the entire story was a fabrication that spiraled out of control, fueled by the desperate hopes of those who followed. Yet the persistence of the search and the occasional, small discoveries keep the legend alive. Perhaps the treasure wasn't a natural gold vein but a cached fortune, hidden by Spanish explorers, Jesuit priests, or even outlaws like Billy the Kid. The mountain's location on a historical travel route makes this plausible. The enduring mystery of Victoria Peak is no longer just about gold. It has become a modern-day parable about obsession, the conflict between private belief and government authority, and the powerful human need to believe that a life-changing secret is still out there, waiting just on the other side of a barbed wire fence. It represents the ultimate what-if, a dream that has survived shootings, bankruptcies, and decades of official denial. The mountain still stands silent and off-limits, guarding its secret in the heart of America's most secure testing ground, a monument to the idea that the most valuable treasure might simply be the dream of finding it. But if you thought the hunt for Victoria Peak was a tangled web of claims and government secrecy, prepare for a mystery that has consumed lives and fortunes for over 2 centuries, a puzzle so complex and so meticulously engineered that it has been called the world's largest and most expensive treasure hunt. Our next destination takes us to a small, unassuming island off the coast of Nova Scotia, a place shrouded in mist and legend where an intricate booby trap has defied every attempt to solve it. This is the story of the Oak Island Money Pit, a mystery that has lured everyone from famous actors to seasoned engineers, and whose central question remains: what could possibly be so valuable that someone would go to such impossible lengths to hide it? The legend begins in 1795 when a local teenager named Daniel Maginnis spotted strange lights on the island and decided to investigate. In a small clearing, he found a curious depression in the ground, directly beneath an old oak tree with a branch that appeared to be cut, as if used as a pulley. He returned with 2 friends and they started to dig. What they discovered was no simple hole. Just a few feet down, they hit a layer of flagstones not native to the island. 10 feet down, they encountered a platform of sturdy oak logs securely set into the walls of the shaft. At 20 and 30 feet, they found identical platforms. They had to stop, but they had sparked a mystery that would soon captivate the world. This was no natural sinkhole. It was a shaft meticulously constructed, and it went deep. The real engineering genius or madness of the Money Pit revealed itself as expeditions grew larger and more ambitious. As diggers went deeper, they continued to find platforms of oak at regular intervals, along with layers of charcoal, putty, and a strange, fibrous material called coconut fiber, which is not found anywhere near the cold waters of Nova Scotia. Then, at around 90 feet, the searchers made their most tantalizing find: a large, flat stone tablet removed from the shaft, which was later said to bear a cryptic inscription of symbols. Though the stone itself was later lost, a supposed translation emerged. 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. But the true nightmare began just a few feet later. When the team returned the next day, the entire shaft, down to the 60-foot level, was filled with water. They tried to bail it out, but the water level wouldn't drop. They had inadvertently triggered the pit's brilliant and diabolical defense mechanism, a series of flood tunnels. This is the feature that has defined the Oak Island curse. The original builders didn't just dig a hole and fill it with treasure. They engineered a hydraulic lock. 5 fluxed, intricate tunnels were discovered, leading from the main shaft to the surrounding coastline. Smith's Cove, a perfect beach on the eastern end of the island, was later found to be an elaborate fake. Beneath the sand, searchers discovered a vast mat of coconut fiber, thousands of yards of it, acting as a massive filter, and a cunning system of drainage tunnels that fed directly into the flood tunnels leading to the Money Pit. The entire system was designed so that anyone digging past a certain depth would break a watertight seal, allowing the ocean itself to flood the shaft, protecting whatever lies at the bottom with an inexhaustible supply of seawater. For over 200 years, this mechanical curse has broken the backs and the bank accounts of everyone who has tried to defeat it. The list of expeditions reads like a tragic epic of obsession. There was the Truro Company in the 1850s, which used a pod auger to drill down past the flood level. Their drill bore brought up tantalizing clues: 3 small gold links from a chain, strands of wire, and most famously, a tiny scrap of parchment with the letters Roman 6 or Rye visible in ink. This proved something man-made was down there. Then came the relentless Ristall family in the 1960s, whose quest ended in unimaginable tragedy when 4 men, including Robert Ristall and his son, were overcome by fumes in a shaft and died. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a lifelong follower of the mystery and even financed expeditions, his interest never waning even during his presidency. Modern efforts, most notably by the Lagina brothers as featured on the History Channel's The Curse of Oak Island, have brought massive technology to bear enormous caissons, underwater cameras, and sonic drilling, spending millions of dollars to finally answer the question. They have found compelling evidence, a Spanish coin, a medieval cross, and even human bones, but the central chamber, the heart of the mystery, remains elusive. So what could possibly justify such an immense and sophisticated undertaking? The theories are as varied as they are extraordinary. The classic idea is that it's pirate treasure, specifically that of Captain William Kidd or the infamous Edward Blackbeard Teach. But would pirates, known for spending their loot as fast as they got it, have the patience or the engineering skill to construct something this complex? A more compelling theory points to the British military, suggesting the pit was used to hide the treasury of the garrison in Havana during the 7 Years' War, or even the lost jewels of Marie Antoinette, which were allegedly smuggled out of France during the Revolution. Perhaps the most fascinating theories move away from gold entirely. Some researchers, noting the involvement of early Freemasons in the original searches and the possible Masonic symbolism on the lost stone tablet, believe the pit could hold something of immense religious significance. This includes everything from the original manuscripts of William Shakespeare, some believe Francis Bacon wrote them and hid them there, to the Holy Grail or the Lost Ark of the Covenant. The most dramatic theory suggests it is the final resting place of the Holy Rose Cross, a sacred relic of the Rosicrucian order, hidden away from a world they believed was not yet ready for its power. The enduring allure of Oak Island is not just about the potential treasure, it's about the brilliance of the puzzle itself. The sheer audacity of the construction suggests that whatever is buried there was considered more valuable than the immense effort required to hide it. Every artifact pulled from the mud, from a single coin to a scrap of parchment, is a breadcrumb on a trail that has stretched for centuries. It represents the ultimate cold case, a mystery built in layers of wood, stone, and seawater, a challenge that continues to whisper that the answer is just one more dig away, if only one can outsmart the ingenious minds of the past. Yet for all the intricate puzzles and deadly traps engineered to protect treasure on land, the sea holds its own secrets with a cold, indifferent grip, guarding fortunes lost not to clever design but to the raw, unpredictable fury of a storm. Our next story carries us from the cryptic shores of Oak Island to the tempestuous waters of the North Sea, where a legendary warship and its priceless cargo were claimed by a gale, giving rise to one of the most famous symbols in the world of finance and a mystery that remains tantalizingly unsolved. This is the saga of HMS Lutine, a vessel whose name is forever linked to the colossal fortune it carried and the iconic bell that tolls for loss. HMS Lutine began her life not as a British vessel, but as a proud ship of the French Navy, launched in 1779 as La Lutine, the Imp. She was a formidable fifth-rate frigate, armed with 32 guns and built for both speed and power. However, her service under the French flag was cut short in 1793 when she was captured by the Royal Navy after a fierce battle. The British, impressed with her lines and capabilities, refitted her and pressed her into their own service, anglicizing her name to HMS Lutine. For several years, she served effectively, patrolling the waters and enforcing the blockades that were a key part of Britain's strategy in the French Revolutionary Wars. But her most critical mission, and her last, began in the autumn of 1799. The assignment was one of immense economic and military importance. The Lutine was to transport a truly staggering shipment of gold and silver bullion from Great Yarmouth in England to the port of Hamburg in Germany. The cargo was not meant for war, it was meant to prevent economic collapse. Hamburg's banks were on the verge of failure, a crisis that could have disastrous ripple effects across Europe and cripple the Allied forces fighting Napoleon. The bullion, a mix of gold bars and Spanish silver coins, was intended as a massive loan to stabilize the financial system and keep the supplies flowing to the British Army. The total value was astronomical for its time, estimated at over £1 million sterling, which translates to well over $100 million in today's money. The Lutine, a fast and well-armed frigate, was chosen for her speed and her ability to defend herself if intercepted. She set sail on October 9, 1799, under the command of Captain Lancelot Skinner, carrying not just a king's ransom but the economic fate of a continent. She would never see her destination. Just 2 days into the voyage, the Lutine ran into a monstrous northwesterly gale off the coast of the Netherlands. The storm was of legendary ferocity, driving the ship off course and toward the deadly, shallow sandbanks known as the Frisian Islands. Captain Skinner and his crew fought desperately against the wind and waves, but it was a hopeless battle. In the early hours of October 10th, the Lutine was driven onto a sandbar near the island of Terschelling, and battered by the relentless surf, she broke apart and sank almost instantly. Of the nearly 240 souls on board, there was only one survivor, a sailor who was pulled from the wreckage but who died shortly after, taking the full story of those final, terrifying moments with him. The ship, its crew, and its unimaginable cargo were all lost to the churning, sandy depths. The news of the disaster sent shockwaves through the financial world, but nowhere was the impact felt more acutely than at Lloyd's of London. The famed insurance underwriters had insured the vast majority of the Lutine's cargo. The loss was so catastrophic that it threatened to bankrupt the entire corporation. In a stunning display of integrity and financial resilience, Lloyd's made the decision to pay the claim in full. This single act cemented their reputation for reliability and made them the most trusted name in global insurance, a status they hold to this day. But paying the claim did not mean giving up on the treasure. Almost immediately, Lloyd's asserted its ownership of the sunken gold and launched what would become one of the longest and most technologically ambitious salvage operations in history. The challenges were immense. The wreck site was in notoriously treacherous waters, with shifting sands and fierce currents that constantly buried and revealed the fragments of the ship. Early salvage attempts in the 1800s were primitive and dangerous. Divers in crude brass helmets connected to air pumps on surface vessels braved the cold, dark water to feel around in the zero visibility. They managed to recover a small fraction of the treasure, a few hundred gold bars and several thousand silver coins, but the vast majority of the hoard remained stubbornly buried in the sand. The most significant recovery, however, was not of gold but of brass. In 1859, a salvage team located and brought up the ship's bell. It was a magnificent object, and it was presented to Lloyd's, where it was hung in their underwriting room. This bell was transformed from a recovered artifact into a powerful, living symbol. Lloyd's established a tradition that continues to this day. The Lutine bell is rung on ceremonial occasions, but it also serves a solemn, practical purpose. It is sounded twice to announce the news of a missing ship at sea, and once upon the safe arrival of a vessel that was overdue. For over a century and a half, its clear, mournful tone has marked both loss and salvation, a direct auditory link to that fateful night in 1799. The bell itself is a treasure far beyond its material value. It is the soul of the sunken ship, giving voice to the perpetual risks of the sea that Lloyd's itself was built to underwrite. Despite centuries of effort and the advancement of technology from diving bells to side-scan sonar, the greater part of the Lutine's treasure has never been found. The sands have proven to be a more effective vault than any built by man. Modern estimates suggest that over 80% of the bullion, worth hundreds of millions of dollars today, is still down there, scattered and buried deep beneath the seafloor. The Dutch government, which has jurisdiction over the waters, has periodically granted salvage licenses, and searches continue even now, driven by the enduring allure of such a documented and valuable prize. The wreck of the Lutine is more than just a shipwreck, it is a cornerstone of financial history. Its loss created a legend of corporate responsibility, and its bell became an icon that speaks to the very heart of maritime risk and reward. The sea, however, keeps its final secret, holding onto the gold that helped build a reputation and forever linking the name Lutine to both a tragic loss and an unshakable promise. Now we venture south to the very end of the world, where the wind howls across jagged peaks and the sea crashes against a labyrinth of fjords. This is Patagonia, a land of breathtaking, brutal beauty that has always existed on the very edge of the map, both geographically and in the human imagination. And it is here, in this vast and unforgiving wilderness, that some of history's most ambitious treasure legends have taken root, promising fortunes to those brave enough to confront the elements themselves. The stories weaving through this region are a fascinating tapestry, blending the ruthless ambition of pirates with the desperate flight of a fallen empire, all set against a backdrop so remote it feels like another planet. The pirate chapter of this story is dominated by one of the most infamous figures to ever sail the Spanish Main, Sir Francis Drake. While often celebrated as a hero in England for circumnavigating the globe and raiding Spanish holdings, to the Spanish he was nothing less than a demon, El Dragon. His voyage through the treacherous Strait of Magellan in 1578 is the stuff of legend, but it's what he might have done afterward that fuels the treasure myth. The story goes that after plundering an incredibly rich Spanish galleon, some say it was the Cacafugo, his ship, the Golden Hind, was so overloaded with silver, gold, and jewels that it was in danger of foundering. Needing to lighten his load for the long and dangerous journey home, and perhaps wanting to create a strategic cache for future voyages, Drake supposedly chose a secluded, easily recognizable cove somewhere along the desolate Patagonian coast. There his crew would have buried a portion of their astronomical plunder, marking the site with cryptic stone cairns or carving a map into the very bedrock. For centuries, expeditions have scoured the countless bays and inlets of the Chilean and Argentine coastlines, searching for any clue that might lead to Drake's secret bank. The challenge is immense. The coastline is a maze of identical-looking fjords, and 400 years of erosion and shifting glaciers have likely erased any surface clues, leaving only the tantalizing possibility that a fortune in Elizabethan plunder still lies buried beneath the peat and stone. But the pirate tales are just one layer of the mystery. A far older and more profound legend speaks to the great tragedy of the New World, the fall of the Inca Empire. As the forces of Francisco Pizarro advanced on the Inca capital of Cusco, the story tells of a desperate and brilliant escape plan. Rather than let their vast sacred wealth, the gold and silver that adorned their temples and represented their gods, fall into the hands of the conquistadors, a loyal contingent of Inca priests and warriors was tasked with moving it to safety. But they didn't just hide it in a nearby valley. They undertook an epic, months-long exodus carrying tons of gold artifacts, life-sized gold statues of llamas and corn, and emeralds the size of fists, traveling thousands of miles south, down the spine of the Andes, to the farthest, most remote reaches of their known world, Patagonia. Here, in a system of secret caves known only to them, they reputedly walled up this national treasury, the very soul of their civilization, intending to return for it when the invaders were finally driven out. That day never came, and the knowledge of the location was lost, passed down only in whispered legends among local indigenous tribes. These stories speak of a sacred city of caves called Ciudad de los Césars, or the City of the Caesars, a place that would appear shimmering like a mirage in the mountains, a ghostly echo of a lost world filled with gold. The allure of these stories has proven irresistible, drawing fortune hunters into one of the most challenging environments on Earth. The search for Patagonia's treasures is not like combing a tropical beach or digging in a desert canyon. This is a quest that demands a special kind of fortitude. Explorers face hurricane-force winds that can knock a person off their feet, freezing temperatures even in summer, and a landscape of sheer granite walls, immense glaciers, and dense, trackless forests. The logistical challenges are staggering. Simply getting to a potential search area requires immense planning and resources, yet the searches persist. In the early 20th century, a man named Colonel George Claraz mounted an expedition based on a map he claimed to have decoded, leading him to a specific cave system. He returned with stories of finding ancient, man-made steps leading into a cavern and strange markings on the walls, but no definitive treasure. Other modern hunters, armed with metal detectors and ground-penetrating radar, have followed similar clues, often focusing on the area around Mount Fitzroy, a towering granite spire whose dramatic profile makes it a perfect natural landmark for a hidden cache. The enduring power of the Patagonian treasure myth lies in this perfect storm of factors. It combines the tangible, historical reality of pirate raids and the Inca's vast wealth with a landscape so grand and hostile that it seems capable of hiding anything. The sheer scale of Patagonia is the ultimate safeguard. You could hide a dozen lost cities in its immensity and never find them. This isn't just a search for gold. It's a search for the last refuge of a vanquished empire, for the hidden safe house of history's most daring pirate, and for the validation of stories that have been told and retold for generations around campfires, sheltered from the relentless Patagonian wind. It represents the ultimate frontier of treasure hunting, where the prize isn't just a fortune, but the answer to a historical what if that stretches across an entire continent. Now imagine a different strategy altogether, one born not from hoarding treasure in a single massive galleon, but from dispersing it into the wind like a desperate gambler spreading his chips across the table. This is the cunning, high-stakes logic behind the legend of the Mosquito Fleet, a story that trades the epic tragedy of a single shipwreck for 100 smaller, more intimate mysteries scattered like glittering dust across the shallow waters of the Caribbean. As the Spanish treasure fleets lumbered their way from the New World back to Seville, they were the most tempting targets on the high seas, floating banks that every pirate from Havana to Port Royal dreamed of intercepting. The Spanish knew this, and so they developed a clever, if incredibly risky, countermeasure. The plan was deceptively simple. When a large, vulnerable galleon, perhaps already damaged by a storm or fearing an imminent pirate attack, approached the final and most dangerous leg of its journey through the Florida Straits and the Bahamas, it would sometimes initiate a secret operation. Under cover of darkness or in the concealing haze of a shallow mangrove bay, the crew would begin the arduous task of transshipment. This meant transferring portions of the ship's registered treasure, and more importantly, the vast quantities of untaxed, smuggled goods that officials and merchants were trying to sneak past the king's accountants from the large, slow galleon onto a flotilla of smaller, faster, and far less conspicuous local vessels. These were the falachos, balandras, and piroguas, the mosquitoes of the sea. They were shallow draft sloops and schooners manned by local crews who knew the labyrinthine channels and hidden coves of the Keys and the Bahamas like the backs of their hands. Their mission was to break the treasure into smaller parcels and run the gauntlet separately, slipping past the pirate patrols undetected and meeting up at a pre-arranged rendezvous point on the Cuban coast, or perhaps even making the entire run to Spain independently. On paper, it was a brilliant tactical maneuver. In reality, it was a recipe for 1,000 different disasters. While a pirate might easily spot a towering galleon on the horizon, they would hardly notice a few local fishing boats. But the sea does not discriminate by size. A storm that would merely inconvenience a massive warship could be utterly catastrophic for a small sloop overloaded with silver bars. A sudden squall, a misread channel, or a simple navigational error could send one of these little treasure-laden vessels to the bottom in an instant, often in water so shallow that the masts might remain visible above the waves for days as a grim marker. Worse still, the plan relied on the absolute loyalty of the Mosquito Fleet crews. The temptation for these often poorly paid sailors was immense. Why risk the dangerous journey back to deliver the king's gold when you could simply vanish into the countless uninhabited islands of the Bahamas, bury the treasure on a deserted beach, and invent a story about being shipwrecked? It was the perfect crime, and many historians believe it happened far more often than the Spanish authorities ever admitted. This is why the legend of the Mosquito Fleet is so pervasive and so alluring to modern treasure hunters. Unlike hunting for a single, documented shipwreck like the Atocha, this is a search for ghosts. There are no grand manifests for these clandestine operations, no official records of $1 million loss. The evidence is fragmentary and anecdotal. A single silver coin found in the sand of a remote quay that shouldn't be there, a historical account of a merchant in Seville complaining that his smuggled consignment never arrived, a local legend passed down for generations in the Bahamas about a fisherman's ancestor who suddenly came into wealth and bought a large plantation. Each of these tiny clues could be a breadcrumb leading to one of these lost transfers. The geography itself is a huge part of the story. The hunting grounds for this dispersed treasure are the incredibly shallow banks and mangrove islands stretching from the dry Tortugas eastward through the Florida Keys and across the Great Bahama Bank. This is water where you can often see the bottom, where a shadow on the sandy floor could be a cannon or a ballast pile. It's accessible to anyone with a small boat, a metal detector, and a good chart. This accessibility has fueled a modern-day gold rush of independent explorers. They aren't funded by large corporations. They are often solo hunters or small groups, scanning the beaches with handheld detectors after a storm or free diving on a suspicious-looking patch of reef. The dream isn't to find an entire galleon's worth of treasure, but to find one of these smaller caches, a single chest of silver coins or a cluster of gold bars that constituted one mosquito's load. It's the idea that a life-changing discovery might not require a multi-million-dollar expedition, but simply patience, local knowledge, and a fantastic bit of luck. The lost treasure of the Mosquito Fleet is a democratized dream, a reminder that sometimes the greatest fortunes aren't lost in one grand catastrophe, but in 100 silent, secretive whispers beneath the clear, shallow waters of the Caribbean. Yet, even as we explore the watery graveyards of the Caribbean, our journey now turns toward a profoundly different landscape, a place where treasure is not hidden by water, but by sheer, stark absence. We venture into the Negev Desert, a vast and beautifully austere wilderness in southern Israel. This is a land of scorching sun, dramatic canyons, and silence so deep you can hear the wind sculpt the stone. For millennia, it has been a crossroads of empires and a refuge for the desperate, a place where the very harshness of the environment became the perfect safeguard for secrets. The treasure legends here are not of pirate chests, but of sacred relics and the vanished wealth of forgotten kingdoms, all buried beneath the endless sands. Perhaps the most powerful and enduring legend is that of the temple treasure. When the Roman legions under Titus besieged and ultimately destroyed Jerusalem and the Second Temple in 70 AD, the historical record tells a story of comprehensive looting. The magnificent golden ritual objects, the seven-branched menorah, the silver trumpets, and the table of showbread were paraded through the streets of Rome in triumph, their images immortalized on the Arch of Titus. But what if not everything was taken? Jewish tradition and later folklore hold that pious priests, foreseeing the coming catastrophe, undertook a desperate mission to save the most sacred items from desecration. The theory suggests that under cover of darkness, a trusted few smuggled these treasures out of the doomed city. Their destination, the remote and inhospitable caves of the Negev Desert. This was not random. The desert had long been a place of refuge and concealment, from the days of the biblical prophets to the more recent rebels of the Bar Kokhba revolt. The idea that the heart of Jewish worship could be waiting in a hidden cavern, perhaps sealed behind a perfectly fitted stone, is a story that has driven exploration for centuries. The immense spiritual and historical value of such a find is almost incalculable, a direct link to the most sacred site in Judaism, hidden by devotion and preserved by the desert's dry air. But the Negev's secrets are not solely Jewish. Long before Rome, this desert was the domain of the Nabateans, a remarkably sophisticated Arab civilization whose mastery of the arid environment made them unimaginably wealthy. You know them best for their breathtaking capital city, Petra, carved into rose-red cliffs in modern-day Jordan, but their trade routes crisscrossed the entire Negev. They were the undisputed masters of the incense trade, transporting frankincense and myrrh from southern Arabia to the markets of the Mediterranean. This commerce generated staggering profits, and the Negev was dotted with their cities, fortresses, and caravanserai. As the Roman Empire absorbed their kingdom and maritime routes eventually supplanted the overland trails, the Nabateans' power waned. The legend persists that with the decline, the last of their great merchant princes hid their accumulated wealth, chests of gold and silver coins, sacks of precious gems, and stocks of invaluable incense in secure hiding places along their old routes. These would not be grand tombs like those in Petra, but simple, unmarked caves or cisterns in the middle of nowhere, known only to a select few whose knowledge may have died with them. The desert has a way of reclaiming such places, burying entrances under sand drifts and making a secret hoard look like just another feature of the natural landscape. Adding another rich layer to the mystery are the ancient copper mines of Timna, located in the far south of the Negev. This is one of the oldest known mining districts in the world, operational as far back as the time of the Egyptian pharaohs. The scale of production was immense, with thousands of tons of copper extracted over the centuries. Copper was the backbone of the ancient economy, used for tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects. Control of these mines meant immense power and wealth. The legends here are less about hidden chests and more about a lost product. Could a particularly rich vein have been mined to create a special hoard of ritual objects for an Egyptian temple or for a local king? Furthermore, the mines themselves are a labyrinth of tunnels and shafts, many of which were backfilled or collapsed in antiquity. It is entirely plausible that a workspace could have been sealed with tools, smelted copper ingots, and the personal effects of the miners still inside, creating a perfectly preserved time capsule of ancient industry that awaits discovery. Woven through all these historical narratives are the oral traditions of the Bedouin, the nomadic tribes who have called the Negev home for centuries. Their stories, passed down around campfires, speak of magical caves discovered by chance. A shepherd chasing a stray goat might stumble upon a narrow opening that leads to a cavern filled with strange artifacts, crumbling scrolls in forgotten languages, rusted weapons unlike any they've seen, or even jars containing ancient coins. The most common motif in these tales is the discovery of gold not worked into jewelry, but in its raw form, nuggets or dust, sometimes said to be hidden in caves marked with mysterious, ancient symbols on the walls. For the Bedouin, these stories often carry a moral warning. Such wealth is often protected by jinn spirits or carries a curse. Disturbing it brings misfortune. This cultural layer adds a profound dimension to the search. It suggests that discoveries have been made sporadically over the years by local people who, respecting the old warnings or fearing the attention it would bring, simply left the treasure where it lay and kept the secret within their tribe. The modern search for the Negev's treasures is a fascinating blend of high technology and old-fashioned exploration. Archaeologists and treasure hunters alike scan satellite images for unusual geological formations or the faint outlines of ancient structures invisible from the ground. They use drones to map inaccessible cliff faces, searching for the telltale darkness of a cave entrance. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in nearby Qumran is a constant reminder that the desert's dry climate can preserve organic materials like parchment, leather, and wood for millennia, raising the tantalizing possibility of finding more texts that could rewrite history. Every excavation of an ancient Nabatean caravanserai or a Byzantine church comes with the hope of a foundational deposit, a secret cache hidden under a floor or behind a wall. The challenge, as always, is the sheer, overwhelming scale of the desert. A treasure cave could be hidden in one of 1,000 unnamed canyons, its entrance obscured by a rockslide that occurred 1,000 years ago, waiting for the right pair of eyes to finally see what time and the elements have tried so hard to conceal. Yet, even as we contemplate the silent, sun-baked secrets of the Negev, our journey takes a dramatic turn toward the fury of the sea, to a tempest of such legendary violence that it not only claimed a ship and its fortune, but also changed the science of weather forecasting forever. This is the story of the Royal Charter, a vessel whose tragic end on the rocky coast of Wales embodies the raw power of nature and the enduring lure of gold lost to the depths. Imagine a ship that was the pinnacle of maritime technology in its day, a mighty steam clipper combining the relentless power of a steam engine with the graceful speed of a sailing ship. Launched in 1855, the Royal Charter was built for one specific, lucrative run, ferrying passengers and, most importantly, gold from the Australian colonies back to the heart of the British Empire in Liverpool. She was fast, reliable, and on her final voyage in October 1859, she was carrying a cargo that made her a floating treasure chest. In her strong room was gold, a vast quantity of it, freshly dug from the mines of Victoria and New South Wales. This wasn't just official shipments, it was the personal wealth of hundreds of successful prospectors who were returning home rich men, their fortunes converted into gleaming sovereigns and heavy, raw nuggets sewn into their money belts and hidden in their luggage. The total value was staggering, estimated at over £300,000 at the time, a sum worth tens of millions today. After a swift 2-month journey from Melbourne, the Royal Charter was on the very brink of completing her voyage. She was just hours away from her destination, sailing through the Irish Sea with the coast of Anglesey, Wales, visible through the stormy haze. The passengers, eager to set foot on dry land after their long journey, were likely already packing their belongings, dreaming of the lives their newfound wealth would buy. But nature had other catastrophic plans. The ship was steaming directly into what would become one of the most infamous storms in British maritime history, a hurricane of unprecedented ferocity that would later be christened the Royal Charter Gale. As winds reached hurricane force, the ship's captain tried desperately to find shelter, but the powerful steam engine was no match for the hurricane. The storm drove the vessel relentlessly toward the rocky lee shore. With her anchors snapped and her sails in tatters, the Royal Charter was hurled onto the rocks just off the village of Molesford in the early hours of October 26th. The scene was one of utter horror. The massive waves, fueled by the hurricane, battered the iron hull against the sharp rocks, breaking the ship in two. Of the 459 people on board, only about 40 survived. Many passengers, weighed down by the belts of gold coins they had refused to abandon, drowned within sight of land. It was a national tragedy that shocked the British public to its core. In the aftermath of the disaster, the recovery of both bodies and gold began immediately. The storm had been so violent that it had scattered the ship's wreckage and its precious cargo along the coastline. The local villagers of Molesford, known for their bravery and seamanship, heroically saved those they could, but their efforts soon turned to the grim task of retrieving the dead and the treasure that washed ashore. The initial salvage operations were remarkably successful, recovering a significant portion of the registered gold, but the sea and the shifting sands of the rocky coast began to claim their prize. Much of the gold was not in secure chests but on the persons of the passengers, and as their bodies were pulled out to sea or buried under the sand, their fortunes went with them. Furthermore, the immense force of the storm had scattered coins and nuggets across the seabed, burying them in a constantly moving landscape of sand and gravel. Within a few years, the visible wreck was picked clean, and the vast treasure was assumed to be lost, becoming the stuff of local legend. The story, however, was far from over. The relentless motion of the sea, which had hidden the gold, occasionally revealed it. Over the decades, particularly after severe winter storms would scour the seabed, lucky beachcombers would make extraordinary finds. A child might find a gold sovereign gleaming in the sand. A fisherman might haul up a lump of sea-worn gold in his net. These sporadic discoveries proved that a fortune was still out there waiting. This led to a renewed modern hunt using advanced technology. In the 1980s and 90s, salvors using metal detectors and diving equipment returned to the site with a vengeance. Their efforts were spectacularly successful, uncovering hundreds more gold coins and several large gold nuggets that had been buried for over a century. One diver alone recovered gold worth over £50,000 in a single season. These finds confirmed that the stories were true. A substantial amount of gold had never been recovered by the original salvors. So what remains hidden today? Modern estimates based on the original manifests and the well-documented modern finds suggest that gold with a value in the millions of dollars may still be out there. But this isn't just about coins. The real fascination lies in the personal nature of this treasure. We're not looking for neatly stacked ingots from a government mint. The lost gold of the Royal Charter is the lost dream of individual prospectors. Its unique, hand-worked nuggets of various sizes and purities. Its exquisite jewelry commissioned from Australian goldsmiths by miners for their loved ones back home. It's those heavy leather belts, now long disintegrated, whose hard-earned coins have settled into the seabed. This treasure has a human face, which makes its loss all the more poignant and its potential discovery all the more thrilling. The challenge of finding it is immense. The coastline is treacherous, the visibility in the water is often poor, and the gold is not concentrated in one wreck site but scattered over a wide area, constantly being moved and reburied by the very storms that created the legend. The lost treasure of the Royal Charter is a ghost of a storm, a fortune scattered by the wind and the waves, offering a fleeting glimpse of wealth to those who dare to search one of the most dangerous and beautiful coastlines in the world. And now we arrive at a treasure that represents the very pinnacle of opulence and artistry, a symbol of a lost world of imperial splendor that was so exquisite, its loss feels like a crime against beauty itself. We have spoken of gold ingots and silver coins, of sacred relics and sunken galleons, but our final treasure is something else entirely. A collection of objects so masterfully crafted, so imbued with whimsy and genius that they transcend mere value and become priceless works of art. This is the story of the lost imperial Fabergé eggs, and it begins not in a mine or on a battlefield, but in the glittering workshops of a jeweler whose name became synonymous with perfection. To understand the significance of these eggs, you must first picture the world that created them. In 1885, Tsar Alexander III sought a special Easter gift for his wife, the Empress Maria Feodorovna. He commissioned a jeweler already famed for his work, Peter Carl Fabergé. The resulting object, simply called the hen egg, was a masterpiece of deception. From the outside, it appeared to be a simple, polished enamel egg, but when the Empress opened it, she found a matte gold yolk inside, opening that revealed a tiny golden hen, and within the hen was a miniature diamond replica of the imperial crown and a tiny ruby pendant. The delight and surprise it brought the Empress was so profound that the Tsar immediately appointed Fabergé as the official jeweler of the imperial court, granting him complete creative freedom with just one directive: each egg must be unique and must contain a surprise. Thus began a tradition that would last until the fall of the Romanov dynasty, a tradition of creating the most elaborate and expensive Easter gifts the world has ever known. The craftsmanship involved was nothing short of miraculous. Fabergé and his team of master artisans worked for over a year on each egg, utilizing a breathtaking array of materials. We're not just talking gold and diamonds. They used translucent enamels applied in multiple layers to achieve depths of color never seen before, rare woods like Caerleon birch, exquisite gemstones like Siberian amethysts and demantoid garnets, and even panels of miniature portraits painted on ivory. But the true magic lay in the surprises, or surprises as Fabergé called them. These were not simply trinkets, they were mechanical marvels. One egg, the Trans-Siberian Railway egg, contained a precise, wind-up model of the imperial train made of gold and platinum, so small yet so detailed that it actually chugged along when activated. Another, the coronation egg, held a perfect miniature replica of the coronation coach, complete with working suspension and tiny steps that folded down. Each egg was a story, a celebration of an imperial anniversary, a new palace or a royal yacht, a perfect jeweled capsule of history. 50 of these imperial eggs were created between 1885 and 1916. After the revolution, the Bolsheviks, who saw them as symbols of the decadent old regime, confiscated them along with the rest of the Romanov treasures. While many were eventually sold off by the Soviet government to raise hard currency acquired by wealthy Western collectors like Malcolm Forbes, the trail for 7 of these masterpieces has gone completely cold. Their absence is a haunting blank space in art history. The first of the missing is the 1886 hen with sapphire pendant egg. Its surprise is believed to have been a pendant, but the egg itself has vanished without a trace. Then there is the 1888 cherub with chariot egg, described in ledgers but never photographed, its design a total mystery. The 1897 mauve egg is another ghost, known only from a single monetary notation in the imperial account books. Perhaps the most tantalizing of the missing is the 1903 Royal Danish egg, or the Jubilee egg. Created for the Empress's parents, it was a loving tribute and is thought to have contained miniature portraits of the Danish royal family. The 1909 Alexander Roman III commemorative egg was a Sommer piece honoring the late Tsar, and its surprise was a stunning miniature gold bust of Alexander himself. The fate of the 1916 Order of St. George egg is particularly poignant. It was the last egg either Nicholas or Alexandra would ever receive. Given during the depths of World War I, it was made of simple silver and enamel, a stark departure from the dazzling gems of previous years, and it contained miniature portraits of the Tsar and his son. Its modest beauty makes its disappearance all the more tragic. Finally, there is the 1917 birch egg. Made of Karelian birch wood and lined with gold, it was a gift from the imprisoned Tsar to his mother after his abdication, a final, heartbreaking gesture of love from a family that would soon be murdered. Its simple, elegant design represents the very end of an era. The search for these 7 lost eggs is a global detective story that combines art history, forensic accounting, and sheer luck. Researchers scour old auction catalogs looking for misidentified ornamental eggs. They track the movements of Soviet trade officials in the 1920s and 30s, trying to see if an egg was sold privately to a dealer and its record lost. There is always the hope that one is sitting in a safety deposit box or on the mantelpiece of a family who, for generations, had no idea what they truly possessed, thinking it merely a beautiful, if eccentric, heirloom. This exact scenario played out in 2012 when a scrap metal dealer in the American Midwest bought a gold and diamond-encrusted object at a flea market for $14,000, intending to melt it down for its bullion value. When he couldn't find a buyer, he Googled the name inscribed on it, Fabergé. He had accidentally stumbled upon the 3rd imperial Easter egg, long thought to be lost forever. It was valued at over $33 million. This incredible find gives every treasure hunter hope that another one of the 7 missing masterpieces is still out there, waiting to be recognized, a glittering survivor from a vanished world, ready to tell its story once more. From the sacred enigma of the Ark of the Covenant to the heartbreakingly beautiful mystery of the lost Fabergé eggs, our journey through these 25 legends reveals something far greater than a simple catalogue of missing wealth. It uncovers a fundamental thread in the tapestry of human nature itself, our insatiable curiosity, our deep-seated desire for discovery, and the powerful allure of the unanswered question. These stories endure not merely because of the staggering dollar amounts involved, but because they represent the ultimate what if. They are doorways to forgotten chapters of history, tangible connections to empires that fell, to ships that sank, and to dreams that were buried, often in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. They allow us to touch the past in a way that a history book simply cannot, transforming facts and dates into narratives filled with adventure, tragedy, and the tantalizing possibility of revelation. This enduring fascination is now supercharged by the tools of the modern era. The treasure hunter of today is no longer solely the lone prospector with a worn-out map and a rusty shovel. They are teams of scientists and historians armed with multi-beam sonar that can map the seafloor in intricate detail, ground-penetrating radar that can peer deep into the earth without disturbing a single grain of sand, and sophisticated molecular analysis that can authenticate a fragment of wood or metal in moments. Satellite imagery scans vast deserts for the faint outlines of ancient structures, while advanced DNA testing can trace the provenance of artifacts with breathtaking accuracy. Each technological leap brings us closer to solving these ancient puzzles, yet the mysteries persist, reminding us that the world still holds secrets waiting for the right combination of ingenuity, persistence, and plain old luck to bring them back into the light. This quest is about more than just claiming a prize. It is a continuous process of rewriting our understanding of who we are and where we come from. Every coin recovered from a shipwreck tells an economic story. Every religious relic speaks to centuries of faith, and every piece of lost art completes a cultural picture we thought was finished. The search for these treasures is in its purest form, a search for ourselves, a drive to recover the fragments of our collective story and piece together the complete narrative of human ambition, creativity, and resilience. Now we turn this adventure over to you. After this epic tour through history's greatest mysteries, we have to know, which of these lost treasures captured your imagination the most? Does your mind wander to the deep, anoxic waters of Lake Toplitz, pondering what dark secrets the Nazis tried to hide? Or does your spirit yearn for the high seas, imagining the feel of a gold sovereign from the Royal Charter, warmed by the sun after a century underwater? Perhaps the divine mystery of the Ark calls to you, or the intricate, tragic beauty of the Amber Room fuels your dreams of discovery. Let us know in the comments below which legend you would dedicate your life to solving and why. If these stories of forgotten fortunes and historical enigmas have sparked your curiosity, then you're in the right place. Our channel is dedicated to unraveling the greatest mysteries of our past, one compelling tale at a time. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the unknown. Until then, keep wondering, keep exploring, and never stop believing that the next great discovery might be just around the corner, waiting for someone to find